I had time to run my errands while I waited. I think that's sort of like a meeting room. Be excused. Hello.
Are we live streaming now? We ready to go? All right. Let's just confirm that Councillor Croft, are you still there?
Councillor Croft, you still there? Better texting.
Oh, when I say 8 o'clock, I was wondering if you might have mistaken that for 8 o'clock in the morning French time. We could be a while. I'll try to text him. Okay, says, I lost the connection. Okay, try again. Oh, he says he's still there.
I don't think he is anymore. I'll see. I hung up on him.
Oh, it's confession is good for the soul, Mr. Jones. Hazel, could you go in and get, there's
Welcome to teleconferencing. To join the conference,
in-camera
enter
agenda
your
is one
access code.
page. I just made some notes on it.
At the tone, please state your name, followed by the number sign.
Warren.
You are currently the only participant in this conference.
Okay.
It's going to improve, hopefully.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks.
Announcing participants.
Okay, we have Councillor Croft online. Thank you very much, and thanks for attending all the way from Paris. And I'm going to call the meeting to order. And this is the regular meeting, which was supposed to have started at 7 o'clock, but due to a public meeting was delayed, so it's 8:05 when we start. We always start by acknowledging we gather on the traditional territories of the Lekwungen-speaking people, and specifically we recognize the Songhees and the Esquimalt nations, and that their historic connections continue to these, the historic connections to these lands continue to this day. So I wanted to advise everyone also that you're being live streamed. The folks at home or in Paris will be seeing the backs of your head. These recordings will be archived also. All right, so we start the agenda. We have an amended agenda, and we start for minutes and reports. Number 1, Committee of the Whole, July 16th.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved, seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Special council meeting, also that same day.
Move approval.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Not opposed? I'll try to keep my comments brief.
In favor of both.
Who's opposed? Okay, we're all in favor by the sounds of it, Councillor Croft. And I expect you to say you're against, because as we know, if a no vote is a yes vote. But I will ask you. Sorry, I'm going a little too quick here. First is good news. Gas agreement, community works and fund payment were received over the summer, $425,566.74. So that is the gas tax, essentially. So we're grateful for that, and that's one of the tranches that we expect. We expect that twice a year, and approximately that amount. I also wanted to bring your attention to the Oak Bay and Saanich Centennial Scholarship at University of Victoria. That was established in our Centennial year, and this year has been awarded to a Ms. Hannah Roberts, who is a first-year biochemistry student who comes from Victoria, and she's grateful, and it will help defray tuition costs and financing her educational goals, and she was delighted to get the news and be chosen as a recipient. She's looking forward to her first year and is very excited about her education. So we congratulate her and thank the university for letting us know. A couple of other comments. UBCM was over the past week. Myself, Councillor Zelka, and Councillor Kirby attended. We had a resolution that was put before the Assembly of mayors and councillors. UBCM stands for Union of British Columbia Municipalities. We gather once a year in plenary session to discuss resolutions, which we then pass on to the federal or provincial governments to change their policy. This year we were fortunate to be chosen to have a resolution on the floor. There was 4 others which didn't come forward, and that was on the speculation tax. And it was passed with a very large majority, and that really called, as we remember, for the speculation type tax, which we call a vacancy tax, to be imposed by the municipalities. So that was one thing. At UBCM 2, there was an announcement of childcare funding, and that was up to $1 million per community. And later on, I'm going to suggest under new business, without our colleague, Ms. Kirby, who present, we'll see if there's a consensus to ask our staff to move forward with exploring what it would mean, and bringing something forward to us. We also met with 2 ministers. We met with the Minister of Finance, Ms. James, and one of the issues we raised with her was, can we get more money from the university because they don't pay taxes. The university provincial installations do not pay taxes, and they give us a grant in lieu. Same thing at the federal government. Taxes are not paid to the Esquimalt government. They are given a grant by the federal government. In contrast, Esquimalt gets approximately $15 million a year. For the grant in lieu, we get approximately $48,000 a year, and it's been going down over the last number of years. We tried to advocate that they should move to a system similar to the federal government, which has 2 important aspects. First of all, the grants are not paid by the Navy; they're paid by Public Works, or whatever that's called in Ottawa. And we suggested the same thing happen here, that University Victoria not pay, which they do under the provincial system, but it comes from a separate pot, because often it's unfair to impair the University of Victoria's financial position with these payments. At least that's the argument, but she wasn't open to that. We also asked, the other aspect was that it be a fair relationship between the assessed value and the amount of the grant, and that didn't go anywhere either. But she did say she would look into what's been happening over the last 5 or 10 years, where our grant in lieu has been going down, 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 and down, and this year was down a few thousand from last year. So she promised to look into that. We also met with the Minister of the Environment, talked about our upland sewer project. They're still very supportive of that, and they said they would do all they could to ensure that we get grants that we can use for that project. So they would do what they could in the ministry when we apply for federal or joint federal and provincial grants. So the last bit is a thank you to the Arts Advisory Committee and our Arts Laureate for a fantastic summer of art. We had incredible feedback on the wonderful sculptures and works of art we've had all summer, and also great feedback, of course, on the pianos. And we have our famous Robert Amos piano returned to us, and the others pianos that have been out have gone to good homes. So I want to thank all the organizers, and also thank the businesses along the avenue, because many of them and other organizations supported each and every piece of art. So we're very fortunate in Oak Bay to have so many sponsors that will allow us to get, I think this year we had 13, and we hope everyone will be voting for their favorite, because that's the intention of council would be to buy the favorite art of this past season or the current season. Those are my remarks. Thank you very much. We have next is the public participation period, which runs for 20 minutes. People get 3 minutes at the microphone, up to 3 minutes. You don't have to use them all. And to speak to an item that is related to Oak Bay. I'm going to ask that in light of the fact that we had a public hearing, that you not address that issue, because that's going to be coming back. And if you address it in this forum, it may invalidate the process so far. So, speakers, it's 2011 is the time, or 8:11. Anyone wish to speak to us? Call, ask. Okay, if you could come forward. I'm going to ask that you give your name, and that you give your municipality. You write it down on that. That's right, the podium there, and then I will start when I welcome you. After you give us your name, I will start the 3-minute timer, and then when you hear those wonderful tones, please wrap up as fast as you can afterwards. All right? You speak into the microphone.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor. My name is Anton Brackage.
Welcome.
I am here today to speak about the issue of heavy traffic, unsafe driving, and road safety on Milton Street and Elgin Road. I've recently submitted to the Mayor and Council a petition bearing the signatures of some 20 residents along Milton Street and Elgin Road and on the Milton Street Foul Bay Road corner who share these concerns about the traffic situation on our streets. As stated in the petition, despite being small, mostly residential streets, Milton and Elgin experience heavy traffic due to the presence of the Oak Bay dump, and many drivers race around the corner of Milton Street and Foul Bay Road without sufficient caution. In addition, this corner is poorly lit at night, and this poses a serious hazard to pedestrians and residents. We therefore urge the Oak Bay Council to take steps to reduce traffic on Milton Street and Elgin Road and to improve safety at the corner of Milton Street and Foul Bay Road, such as adding additional warning signs or street lights to the corner of Milton and Foul Bay, and exercising greater scrutiny to ensure that the dump is being used only by residents of Oak Bay. In addition, while collecting signatures for the petition, I spoke with residents of the neighborhood who expressed additional concerns, including the tendency of some drivers to drive down the middle of the street due to the absence of a center dividing line, and even the presence of the dump in its current location. Some proposed other solutions, such as the addition of speed bumps. Nearly every resident I spoke to expressed serious concerns about the traffic situation on Milton and Elgin. I hope that the Mayor and Council will give due consideration as to reducing traffic and improving safety on Milton and Elgin for the benefit of residents, drivers, and pedestrians. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And you're well under your 3 minutes, but you can't bank them for other occasions. I want you to know that. Thank you very much. So just by way of information, that petition, I understand, has gone to the engineering department for consideration. Is that correct, Mr. Haran?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Can also a copy be sent to the police if it hasn't already done? Could you, and because it involves traffic enforcement, and I know one of the priorities for the police department in their strategic plan is traffic enforcement and dealing with traffic safety. So they may have some ideas of how their enforcement mechanisms could assist the residents. So if you make sure that he gets it, thank you very much. Anybody else? Okay, come forward, please. And if there's anyone else after this person, they could be ready at the microphone, and that would be great. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sally Hubbard.
Welcome.
Thank you. I've made several applications to have a deodara tree removed from my rental property on 757, 767 St. Patrick Street, and it has been denied several times.
I'm just going to stop you there, because that's on the agenda tonight, right? As we got that on the agenda?
Yes.
You'll be able to speak at that. I will ask
Oh.
you as the applicant, because you're
Okay.
kind of like the appellant.
Okay.
So you don't have to repeat yourself. I mean, you can tell us now if you prefer, or wait till it comes up. Yeah,
Wait?
because then, wait.
long
It'd
am I
probably be
waiting? I've
easier
been
than,
waiting an hour
you don't have
now.
to worry about 3 minutes.
Oh, I don't have
You don't
much
have-
to say.
Your Worship, it would be more appropriate to wait because
Yeah.
you're going to hear from staff first, so that might
Right,
be.
exactly. And then you'll be able to respond, Ms. Hubbard, you'll be able to respond to the staff. I think that is it. I don't see anyone else at the microphone. Thank you very much. Now we go on to number 5, which is the Urban Wildlife Stewardship Society. They have a presentation, which I think is going to go up on the screens. And just give it a little bit of context and a bit of an update where we are. I've had actually a couple of meetings today on deer, and I'll come to that in a minute. But as we're setting up here, just for a bit of a context, there was a cull in 2015 of deer, and there was 11 deer culled in 16 days. 16 days was all we had available to us with the expert that we'd hired, the only one that we could find in British Columbia at the time from Cranbrook. He only had 16 days available to share with us, and he was able to capture and euthanize 11 deer that went to First Nations. Council after that had a report and later on opted to move forward with the deer reduction plan as proposed by the Urban Wildlife Stewardship Society, who's going to give us an update as to where we are. Council on 2 occasions have supported this plan to the tune of $20,000. In both of those occasions also there have been matching funds from the province of $20,000. Very apropos and totally by coincidence, there was a meeting of PUDAC today, and that is the Provincial Urban Deer Advisory Committee, of which I sit as a representative. From the island, it has representatives from the north and the interior. It has people from ICBC, Forest Lands, Natural Resources and Operations, and it has wildlife officers, as well as the BC wildlife veterinarian, Dr. Schwancha. We had a teleconference on that today, and there was a lot of discussion, but what I can report out of that is the government is continuing its program of about $100,000 a year that they make available to communities that have deer reduction programs. It'll be similar to the funding proposals of the past, maximum of $20,000. They're going to change a little bit in terms of increasing where people that have cull programs. And they also updated, and this is significant because, let me just step one back. We decided in 2015 as council that, actually it was 2014, that to proceed with a cull was necessary to reduce the herd because that was the only option that was given to us by the province. There's really three methods of population reduction. One is cull, one is relocation, and one is birth control. At that time, in 2015, the only one the province would approve would be a cull, no other. Since that time, and we're going to hear about some of it tonight, since that time the province has changed its policy with respect to immunocontraceptive injections. And they may be, very shortly, and this is the part that we heard today, changing their policy on deer relocation. So they ran what so far appears to be, from the preliminary results, a successful operation in the Kimberley area. They removed significant number of deer from there, I think upwards to 100. And the preliminary results are that there was a rather high mortality in moving the deer, or once the deer got to the new place, but it was within kind of expected norms. And but what they did find is some of the deer, when they moved into the wilderness, found their way back into the urban area, which is interesting. Dr. Schwanshi, who's the BC of Wildlife veterinarian, spoke to the issue and the grave concern that she has that needs to be reviewed before relocation is done on a wider scale. And she talked about the chronic wasting disease, which can come from the congregation of deer or the movement of one herd of deer into someone else's territories. So more work apparently has to go on to study the results, to look at that issue of wasting disease before relocation can become an operational program. This was a pilot program in Kimberley, so I just the way things were talked about today, we're probably looking at a year or two before it can be used as a deer reduction program. So that's a bit of an update. But we're certainly grateful to hear that funds will be available in the next provincial fiscal go-round. So, with that, I'm going to introduce Christy Kilpatrick, who is currently the chair of the Urban Wildlife Stewardship Society, and she's here with Dr. Jason Fisher, who's part of that program. I know you have a presentation, and then I'm going to turn it over to you, and then we'll have some questions from council. This is by way of information. No decisions are expected tonight, and there's no motions. And this is an update to the community, if you will, from the group that is running this program. Welcome, Ms. Kilpatrick. You don't have 3 minutes because I know you're going to take longer than that because you have quite a number of slides and quite a lot of information to share with us.
We do.
The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. So as you said, I'm Christy Kilpatrick. I'm president of the Urban Wildlife Stewardship Society, and we are here tonight to update you on the progress of the multi-year research program that Oak Bay, the province, and the Uwss have partnered on. As such, I am so happy to have our lead scientist present to you in the community on the science tonight that is the cornerstone of this project. Just before I introduce him to you, though, I'd like to take this opportunity to just touch on and remind everyone here, spread the word of some simple solutions to help reduce human-deer conflict at this time of year. Public education is one of the other cornerstones of urban deer management. An important component of reducing human-deer conflict is understanding deer behavior, and that's something we're working on. We've all heard some concerns regarding aggressive and intimidating deer. However, it's important to remember that watchful deer behavior is only meant to protect their young. In fact, deer often see humans, particularly humans with dogs, as the aggressor. In fact, according to a recent CBC analysis of human-wildlife conflict across BC in the past 2 years, out of 406 calls to the province about deer considered to be aggressive, the vast majority came from the interior, 11 were from Oak Bay, and 9 resulted in human injury, all when owners put themselves between their dogs and the deer. By comparison, and not to throw them under the bus, raccoons accounted for 17 human injuries. It should be noted that deer in the interior are mainly mule deer who actually can be aggressive without provocation. Our Columbian blacktail deer indigenous to Vancouver Island only demonstrate aggression when they are concerned for their fawn's safety. As a mother, I understand this. With understanding deer behavior and taking some simple steps, most human-deer conflict can be avoided. And so in a nutshell, and just to review, one of the things that's important is to avoid shouting or waving your arms. think how threatening that appears to the protective deer. Instead, avoid eye contact, remain quiet, cross the street when you can, change your route, keep your dog controlled on a short leash, slow down when you're driving in areas where you know there are deer, and if you come across a deer that is trapped or in distress, keep your distance and contact the police, wild arc, or conservation officers to help. Moving on to the exciting project that Oak Bay is engaged in, I'd like to introduce you to two people who have been integral to the work. The first is Dr. Adam Herring, person I fell into his lap a little bit ago. Dr. Herring is our wildlife veterinarian whom you may have seen walking around Oak Bay with a very bright orange vest, orange hat, and something that looks like a rifle slung over his shoulder. He's been known to be standing outside of through sunroofs of Jeeps as well. In fact, it's a dart projector, and Dr. Herring expertly and safely sedated and collared over 20 deer this spring with the help of a field team that included graduate students, members of the Uwss, other volunteers, and Dr. Jason Fisher. Dr. Fisher's passion is studying how species respond to rapid landscape and climate change. He's a wildlife ecologist with an eye for the big picture, a field called macroecology. Dr. Fisher researches terrestrial and coastal wildlife ecology in large, complex, often human-altered landscape from Vancouver Island to Newfoundland and everywhere in between. Dr. Fisher researches how changes humans make to landscapes affect wildlife species' ability to persist, thrive, and coexist, and he helps fit that information into forecasting and decision-making models and processes to help governments, industries, and agencies find effective ways to conserve biodiversity and coexist. We are incredibly fortunate to have Dr. Fisher's volunteer expertise on what really is a cutting-edge project. It's my privilege to invite Dr. Jason Fisher to explain the research behind this important work that is occurring in Oak Bay. Dr. Fisher.
Thank you so much for the introduction.
I'm just going to ask you before you
Yes.
start, Dr. Fisher, let's lift that microphone a little bit. You'll get the help of our technician standing by.
Thank you.
And just stay as close as you can to it so people get home. We can hear you here even without that, but anyone watching or watching the archive tapes will need it.
Can I put this right here? Is that okay?
That's perfect. Yeah,
Perfect,
As long as you
thank
stand
you.
close to it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Your Worship Council, thank you so much for inviting us here today. I'm Jason Fisher. My interest in this research stems from some contact I had with Jeff Waitman at CRD back when the call was first being proposed, and we talked about some research to put numbers around how many deer are actually out there on the landscape so we could help inform those management efforts going forward. At that time, research was deemed to be not necessary. Since then, I've been working with the Urban Wildlife Stewardship Society in order to provide help them do some of the research around how many deer are in Oak Bay and what are they doing there and how can we better inform decisions. So before listening to what I have to say, you should know a little bit about me. I work in the area of contentious wildlife management. So my profile is in Alberta mostly. I live here in Victoria. I'm an adjunct professor at UVic, but I work for the government of Alberta as a research scientist. I work on a whole suite of things, including the caribou declines, the grizzly bear declines. I work on pipeline issues. I work on the effects of oil sands, and recently I've been working on the very contentious wolf call. So some very politically hot topic issues which have legal ramifications behind them. And so my expertise is in providing ADMs, ministers, agencies, whoever needs it, with the very best cutting-edge science that will stand up in court to support their management decisions. And so I'm here working with UWSS because this is an issue I really believe in, and I love this community, and I wanted to be a part of it. It's also very fascinating to me because what's happening here in Oak Bay cannot be taken in isolation. What we are experiencing here is part of a tidal wave of change that's sweeping across the globe, the continent, and British Columbia. Changing landscapes through landscape development, changing climate are all accumulating to change wildlife communities. And urbanization, Oak Bay is lower left, is definitely a significant part of that. UN has shown that 68% of the world population is going to live in urban areas by 2050. So this is not a strange one-off aspect for wildlife management. This is the future of wildlife management, and we are at the forefront of it. Cities cover more of the earth than realized. 3% of the land surface is now covered by cities, and that might not seem like a lot, but when you look at a map of global light pollution, you can see what that actually means for human footprint. Most notably, where that light is all the best, most fertile areas on Earth and the places where wildlife most likely to hang out. So while you'd say we're only taking 3% of this for ourselves, it's the best 3%. So we are coexisting with wildlife in the best places on the planet. Some species lose as a result of that, like woodland caribou, which are expected to be extirpated from several areas of BC and Alberta by 2050. Some species win in association with human habitats, such as blacktail deer. To manage all of this, we need sound information. One thing I've learned in my 20-year career is that you go off and make decisions that are half-cocked. You get half-cocked responses out the back end, and it always comes back to politically bite you in the derriere. So the better information you have now, the sounder science you have, the better you look down the road. So, the culprit today, blacktail deer, lives across Western North America, 7 different subspecies. Ours are the Columbias. They are on Vancouver Island. Now, urban deer, it's important to remember, are a legacy of a couple decisions that were made societally, continentally, as well as locally. So there's this beautiful picture of Oak Bay, lower left, that I scammed off of the web, and you can see what you've done in Oak Bay is create this amazing community that is full of natural vegetation, right? So you've made the decision to ingress homes inside of natural vegetation where wildlife lives. Societally, we've also decided we are going to kick all the predators out of this landscape, and if one shows up, we're going to kill it. We're going to relocate it, which is usually a kill. So wolves, cougars, and black bears, that remarkable shot up there of a black bear with a fawn was just taken just on the other side of the water. These are the things that would normally keep these populations under control. We kicked them all out. And so consequently, we don't have natural population regulation. This problem grows through time. This is McNeil Bay 1935, taken by C.J. Harrington, that I also scammed off of your archives. You can see a whole lot of green space in there and a few houses. And this is 2018, Google Earth, a whole lot more houses. So much higher housing density, more development, and from what I understand, there's going to be more of it going forward, which is more opportunity to stick humans in conjunction, thank you so much, with those wildlife species. So what do we do about it? How do we tackle this? You can go about a call and try to kill some and hope that you've killed enough. You can go about immunocontraception and sterilize some and hope you've sterilized enough. Or you can actually tackle this scientifically, figure out how many deer actually live there, what the deer are doing, use that to inform your decisions going forward, and be relatively well assured of the outcome out the back end. So the central research questions of UWSS are how many deer actually live in Oak Bay? That's the central question because, frankly, we just don't know. We just don't know. Some people will say that it's hundreds and hundreds. Others will say that it's a small number, that you see the same deer all the time. We can actually figure that out, and with some fairly high degree of certainty using some new methods. We also wanted to know what habitats are they using in Oak Bay, because we believe that there's some management options before Oak Bay in terms of landscape planning and landscape urban management that we wanted to make available, at least put them on the table for your information. And finally, we wanted to know, can immunocontraception actually reduce the population? Can we successfully make that happen? In terms of understanding what the effect of immunocontraception is going to be, this right here is what we wanted to avoid. We wanted to avoid a situation where we make an estimate in our green box there of, say, 200 deer with some error around it. Now, the thing about statistical estimation is that there's always error around it, just like in polls, right? And we can have really big error represented by those big bars, or we can have small error. So in the case here, what we want to avoid, we want to say, okay, well, there's 200 deer, but that could be anywhere between 250 and 150 deer. That's pre-treatment. And if we go in and we treat, and we say, well, we've reduced that down to 180 deer, but because of the error in this poll, this survey, it could be anywhere between 230 and 130 deer. Those overlap very obviously, right? And so we're not really sure if we had any effect or not. What we want to achieve is this right here. Do the best science we can so that the error on those surveys is really, really small. So if we come out and say, yep, there's 200 deer, and this is just for way of examination, we don't know if it's 200, and it's between 210 and 190, that's our error, really small error. And so if we find an effect of the contraception and say there's now 180 deer, we'd reduced it by 20, and that could be anywhere between 190 and 170, those are definably different. And they're defensibly different, and based on legal proceedings I've been involved with, they're legally defensible as well. So we want to be able to say this is what we can achieve, and we can achieve it definitively without any error. So how are we doing this is a combination of methods. The first is camera trapping, which is something that I helped pioneer in Western Canada. It's a new, really highly successful method for observing wildlife populations. It's basically your eyes in the field, so you don't have to stand there beside a tree for day in, day out for months in order to count animal numbers. So we've used this really successfully in a whole suite of species, from moose to bears to deer in Alberta and black bears as well. I've used it for highly elusive wolverines, and this research made it to BBC Earth. I used it for grizzly bears, which was recently profiled on Planet Earth. So this is some cutting-edge technology that we're using. So I've fast-forwarded here. How do we get population densities out of a camera array? This is where the advanced statistics come in. But if you can think about this, the upper right figure there, each of those dots we'll assume is a camera on a landscape spread out in a grid pattern. And each of those dots is either going to have deer at it, which is a small dot, or it's going to have not have deer at it, which is a small dot, or it can have a lot of deer at it, which is a big dot. And based on the distribution of those dots and the size of those dots, whether you get 20 deer at a camera and 1 deer at the adjacent camera and none at the far camera, we can then figure out what is the probability that is 1 deer hitting that camera 100 times, or is that 100 different deer hitting that spot. We can do this even better if we have some idea about whether or not there are different deer individuals hitting that camera. So we don't need to have all of them uniquely marked, but if we even have a small amount of them, so we can say, hey, that's yellow, and yellow has returned 5 times to this camera, and yellow is representative of the rest of the population, we can say, on average, a deer returns 5 times to a camera. That's a simplification, but that's the way this works, which is why we went through the expense and effort of capturing and collaring some deer. So this is one of our camera trap photos on the lower left, and that's yellow over yellow. We have these big tags, colored tags that hang off of the collars, so we can see definitively who that individual is. And you can see that, okay, the top one, we don't know who that deer is, the bottom one we do. We can take both of those pieces of information and use them to come up with this very tight population estimate. So these are record of some of our activities in the field. There's Dr. Herring in the left-hand side of the picture with a dart projector, very carefully scoping out the animal to make sure that it's a female, to make sure that we've got clear line of sight and that this scene is clear and that the deer is in a position where we can dart project it and it will go down safely. Once it's hit with the projector in the upper right, the deer sits down, rests, and then goes to sleep. And then the Dr. Herring advances upon it with a top-up if we need to be to keep it down. Once it's down, we put a blindfold over the deer. We keep it in a sternly recumbent position, meaning on its belly, because if you put it on its side, it bloats up. We take a series of samples that the province has mandated that we take, including fecal samples and blood samples and some others. We tag the deer with an ear tag. We put the radio collar on it, and then we let the animal go. And we let the animal sit and relax. The animal comes to. She then gets up and walks around. We monitor her for a period until we see that she's got her legs back. And then she goes about her business. She usually rejoins the doe group that she belongs to, and then eventually shows up on our cameras. So that helps us inform the density estimate. And part 2 of this is we wanted to know how far deer were roaming, because this also helps inform this abundance estimate. You can imagine that if you've got deer that don't move very far and you get them on a lot of camera traps, that means that there's a lot of deer. If you get deer that move around all over the place and you see them hitting a lot of camera traps, that means that there's likely a lot fewer deer in that system because you've got that same one deer hitting 100 cameras, right? So these are GPS satellite collars, which means that they take a GPS location, just like on your phone, transmit it to a satellite that beams it directly to our laptop so we can see in real time where those deer are going on this landscape. And we can create satellite tracks like this one here in Google Earth that define exactly where that animal is once a location is taken. So these are some of the locations of our collared deer. Apologies for the strange thing on the slide. We can download these in batches of 10. So these are 10 of our collared deer. We had 20 that were collared, 18 are still alive. And then there's the other 10 right there. As my 10-year-old daughter noted when she saw this very excitedly, they walk in squiggles. And they do. They walk in squiggles. This is meant to give you an idea of the range that the deer walk in. Look at red. Look at the distance that red is covering, or yellow, or orange. Some of them stay pretty close to home like white, but there's a lot of variability, and these deer covering a lot more space than we ever thought that they would. Here's deer 100454 hanging out around Uplands Golf Course, but you can see that the deer is making use of several different features in that landscape. The Uplands Course, some of the higher density housing, and then down into Uplands Park. So one of our main hypotheses is that deer are actually using multiple different resource types in this landscape in order to maintain themselves there, and that certainly seems to be the case. Sometimes deer do some weird things. This is 10458, which spent a lot of time just north of Oak Bay Marina, fired down to the coastline, went out to the tip of Oak Bay Marina for some reason, then came back and then made its way back to its original location. So you can see there's a lot of variability in the movement of these deer. Yeah, why is the question? Why did the deer cross the road? Here's 100457, just to tie this up, and you can see the deer spent most of its time down south, fired up to Lansdowne, and then came back home again. In its home range, it covered a tremendous amount of area. Each of these are 12-hour fixes, so in the span of less than a half a day, they're moving a lot across these landscapes and crossing a lot of roads, which means people are going to see them a lot. This is all anecdotal now because we're still in the analysis stage, but it looks like these animals are moving a lot more than people thought, which means that people are seeing them a lot more than they thought. I will also say anecdotally that every time we've gone out looking for our deer, I would say 1 in 6 or 7 of the deer that I have seen are one of our collared deer, meaning that we collared probably a significant portion of that population. So what we can do with this data, each of those tracks has a point location associated with it. And we can overlay those points onto a map like this and say, what's at that point in space? Is it a big house? Is it a large lot? Is it a small lot? Is it close to a school or a golf course or some public space? How close is it to a road? We can compare that to a random sample of all the dots in the landscape that the deer was not at, and then run a statistical model that tells us, here are the things that deer are queuing in on. Here's the things that deer are selecting in this landscape. And so then we'll get a better idea. These are the things we're doing from an urban planning perspective that are maintaining deer in this landscape. And maybe that'll provide us with some surprise levers that we can pull in order to perhaps change how we're doing things on an urban landscape. We can ask questions about what kind of private properties do they select? Are they close to parks and public spaces? What roads do they most frequently cross, and kind of what time of day, to help mitigate some of the road crossing MVA activities? So the sky's kind of the limit on this, and we would really like input from Oak Bay to inform us what kinds of questions do you want asked of these data. These are your data, these are our data. We want to work with you to ask the best questions we can out of them. So the next steps for 2018-19 is we want to do the population estimate analysis. So we have almost enough camera data in hand that we can attempt that analysis and ask this question: how many deer are currently in Oak Bay? We want to implement immunocontraception of females sometime in the near future, and then do more monitoring research to test the population responses as initially outlined. If we put out, for instance, immunocontraception on 40 does, by then we'll know what the population size is. So say, for instance, it is 200 deer. If we can immunize 40 does out of 200 total deer population, what effect does that have on the population? Can we see a drop in it? If so, that's great. Maybe we should continue. If not, maybe we should amp that activity up. And I'm going to wrap it up there in the interest of saving time and I guess open it to questions from you. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Dr. Fisher. It's extremely informative to see the movement patterns. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around council to see if there are questions regarding the presentation or the program generally that either Dr. Fisher or perhaps Ms. Kilpatrick can answer. So, any questions? All right. Councillor Murdoch.
Well, we haven't yet got a financial breakdown of what's being spent on it. So can you, if this is an ongoing detailed population study, what does that cost going forward? And I think that was the first time we had a proposal, there was a bit of a balk at the total price because it was so high over the time. So do we have a sense of what is required going forward from a population measurement perspective as part of the scientific?
Christy, so you're asking me scientifically or
budgetarily? Well, I guess we'll get what is required if we're going to keep going down this path. What does that look like from and year over year? You're talking about having very detailed population models and tracking that year over year to see the effectiveness. What does that look like?
So this is what it looks like. So we take the camera data that we have in hand now. We're hoping to get at least another couple of probably 2 more months before we'll have enough to make this model work. So they're just out there running right now, right? That's free. Take the GPS data, the track data from the deer, and do some analysis on that. So that is going to take a couple of months to do based on the data we already have now. And we have a student lined up at UVic who's going to provide some pro bono help with that to reduce those costs. And then we have the heavy statistical model to do, and that's the very difficult part. And there's only about 3 people in Canada who know how to do it. Luckily, one of them is my postdoctoral researcher, and so we have her lined up to do that analysis. That's going to be an expense, probably on the order, I think, of 5,000 to 7,000 or something like that in order to make that happen, because it is pretty heavy lifting. And then then we do the treatment. The cameras still keep running. We have volunteers out in the field that check the camera, so that's cost reduction or almost cost negative. We have to go and download the data, but again, that's relatively inexpensive. The next big cost is going to be the immunocontraception trials. So I'm going to turn it over to Christy and let her talk. Oh, unless
Before
you
you do, just sorry, but I'm not clear in terms of is this, if we're going to measure population, is this continuing on? So this heavy-duty lifting of analysis, does that happen every year then going forward to measure this? Or is this you can take that and take a subset of data going forward?
No, so you need to do the population estimate before you treat, so you know how many deer you're starting with, and then after your treat, so you know how many deer you have in the back end. So the population estimate would be done once now, this fall, and then a year from now, probably next fall or winter or something like that. So just do it twice.
But you'd have to do it every year, basically, just as if you're going to track this over time.
If you want to track it over time, yeah. The point of this research right now isn't is more to understand, can we actually reduce this population based on IC, right? And if it looks like that there's significant reduction, and then if it's useful to council to say, well, we want to make sure that this program is on track, we can repeat it every year. We could repeat it every 5 years. We could repeat it on any cycle that you want, depending on what the availability of money is. Or you can, just say we're not going to follow up on this, but the problem is probably going to reemerge after that. But the point of this is that it's not a requirement to do this analysis year after year after year. You set your own monitoring cycle, right? And we're just here to help inform that and make sure you get the best information on the monitoring cycle that you choose.
Thank you. And you mentioned sort of you having a target of 40 this year. I guess my question on that was, why would you not target as many as you could and do the same measurement but have a much higher chance of success of actually reducing the population?
Yeah. Do you want me to speak to that, Christy, or do you want to? Money. So we had enough money to buy 40 units plus boosters of the drug. So we have to deliver the drug and then go back and follow that deer again a couple weeks later and provide a booster. So we had enough money to do this. We estimated for 40 dose, and that's why we have it. If we had more money, then we could do more of it. But for this particular pilot, that's what we had the money for.
Okay, maybe you can give, that would be a good, those two things maybe would be a good idea to get understanding, because I don't mind spending money on things that are doing something, but the spending money on studying, recognizing the province requires it, is a bit painful at times if we're not actually achieving some of the goals that we're setting out as a community.
Would you want to take statins and then not have your blood monitored to see if your cholesterol was being lowered? Because that's the analogy, right? I mean, you don't take drugs blindly and then hope that they work. You do a treatment and then do some follow-up to see if what you're doing makes sense or not. So when people say that the research is doing nothing, the research is absolutely doing something. It's doing a vital and critical part of this, and I recognize and respect your comments, Councillor. I hear it a lot from ministers from Alberta all the way to Newfoundland. Inevitably, it comes down to political risk. Really what we're doing is we're mitigating political risk down the road by providing firm answers so that it doesn't look like ministers are making decisions and then not following up and doing that cholesterol monitoring down the road and then incur the political risk thereafter.
I think you misunderstood my comment on that. I think my question was, what is that cost to go from 40 to, say, 150?
Oh,
because
I see.
the original point of this was, I think that I don't have the numbers. Sorry, my computer just went down here.
No problem.
But it wasn't that high. The actual, that part of the process was actually quite inexpensive. It was, it was the studying and pieces. So that's my...
Yeah, okay. I'm not sure. I'll have to refer to Christy. Do you know?
I'm not sure. I don't think I'm understanding.
Hang on, can't do that because you won't be heard by people
Yeah,
not in the room.
sorry.
Come on there. There you go.
Please, thanks.
I'm sorry. I don't think I understand your question. I'm sorry.
What is the cost to inoculate one extra deer? I guess is the question I have. We're talking about the. I queried why 40 and not, 100.
Right.
And the answer is we don't have the money. So I guess my question is, what does it cost to actually do the inoculation? Because I think there's an appetite in the community to spend a bit more money to reduce. And as long as we're doing a science, we can measure that whether we're injecting 40 or 150.
So the cost per inoculation.
But the cost per inoculation, actually, Dr. Herring, can you speak to that? It's there were three different models that were put forward, and the model that we ended up going with was Zonistat D. And the reason we went with Zonistat D is because it's the most cost effective. And do you remember what it costs?
I don't know.
It's
Cost of each dose.
like $50 per deer or something like that. Whereas the long-term one that we were hoping could be developed would have been considerably more because it needed to be studied and developed. So the Zonistat D is very, very cost effective. But I'm a little uncomfortable answering the question in that manner because, again, it's the research that has to happen prior to doing that effectively. So the costs are very integral. They're very intertwined. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So that being said, that if you're looking to expand from 40 to 150, we could do the research and we could provide that information to you to say if you wish to increase the number that we're immunocontraceptively treating, then we could. That's tricky. We could provide that information and let you know what that ramp up in operations would cost for sure if that's what you're interested in.
I am very interested in that because I think the difference between inoculating 40 and inoculating, say, 100, if it's $50 a deer, is an additional $2,500.
Yeah.
We have spent $80,000 between us and the province so far. I think that's just that's to the root of my question is, is there anything stopping us from actually taking more action than is sort of being contemplated at this point other than
just money?
Just money. Okay. That's helpful.
Did you want to, sorry, Dr. Herring's got something to add here.
Another thing to take into account is that there's a significant amount of time that goes into each animal. I would say at a minimum an hour per animal for each capture, plus another hour for the boostering, and then time to search out the deer. I don't know exactly what the numbers were for the initial collaring phase, but I would say at least on average a couple hours worth of time. I'm not a volunteer for the project. I have upwards of 10 years of post-secondary instruction that has allowed me to have the skill set to do that work. And so I bill my time at a veterinary rate. And so that's, I think, one of the significant costs of the operation as well.
Okay, thank you. And just, part of the problem we have giving guidance and suggestions here is we've never had a breakdown of what's been spent or we had the initial budget in 2016 and nothing since. So it's a difficult position for us as a political body to do that. So we have to get there, but it's not, for tonight, it's not that important. It's more to get a sense of where we're at.
Although, as mentioned to you, you do actually, those numbers are available to council. There's been updates and reports, and staff have all of the deliverables and the breakdown, so it's been absolutely accounted for. Yeah.
I'm okay for now, thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Ney and then Councillor Kirby.
Yeah, my question was actually along the lines of Councillor Murdoch, but I maybe I'll just ask a little bit different question, is that given what your okay, first of all, are there other jurisdictions that have done this? What have you found in other jurisdictions when you've used immunocontraception as a way to reduce the herd?
You want to go first? Sure.
There are limited numbers of studies that have been done on this, but there are some on whitetail deer, and they've found quite good success, somewhere in the range of 80% of deer that are administered the immunocontraception and the booster are not having fawns the following year.
Okay. So there's obviously a basis on which to do this. So what I was wondering was, if money was not an issue, would you have started by administering the contraception to the entire herd, or what would you have done if money wasn't an issue? I'm just trying to understand, as a scientist coming into this and not knowing whether, I mean, I understood the question is, can we reduce the herd? It's not how much can we reduce it, is what you're asking. So
You're correct, and I mislabeled the slide. The question is actually how much can we reduce the herd, as you've pointed out.
Okay, so
yes.
It's not can
yeah.
we. Okay.
So we know that we can reduce the herd. If you go out and immunocontraceptively treat a deer, odds are it's not going to have a fawn. The question is that actually going to register as a population level response, right? Because in some of the places where this has been tried, there is a population response, and in other places there isn't, because you tend to get immigration, right, of deer into areas. Yeah. And Oak Bay is sitting right next to Saanich, which has a dirt pile of deer, Victoria, which has a dirt pile of deer. It's one of the reasons why a cull is going to be so wildly ineffective, because cull has been tried a lot more than IC, and the effects of culling is almost uniform across all places in North America, which is you clear out your deer, you don't have deer for a year, and then the next year you've got as many deer, sometimes even more, because they come flooding into what is now this beautiful, empty, open smorgasbord of food, and take full advantage of it. There's also not the social structure of the deer in place, because deer actually do have a very rigid social structure. It's kind of a free-for-all, which allows more deer to pack in there instead of having one big male that's keeping all the other males out, right? So you disturb that social structure, you end up with bigger problems. Yeah. So
I'm just wondering, do you have a hypothesis about what is likely to happen here, given our terrain and our non-pervious borders here?
For a cull or for IC?
For IC.
For IC?
Yeah.
Well, our working hypothesis is that we're going to, right now we actually just don't know, because we don't know how many deer we have, right? So if we knew how many deer we have, then I'd be more comfortable stating a hypothesis and saying, given our current abilities to immunize 40 deer out of a population of firm number, then I'd be in a better place to form a hypothesis about that population level effect. The hypothesis is definitely there's going to be a population effect. I just don't know whether right now, whether that's a 10% or a 50% effect. Right. I just don't know. I know there's going to be an effect, though.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. We'll be in a better place to state that hypothesis as soon as we can get these statistics done and get those numbers in play.
Okay. Well, the thing I'd like to say is I just want to thank you and the team for what you're doing, because I do know it's innovative, and it's not easy to do an innovative project when you're in this position, because we tend to be somewhat risk averse, and so it's a bit risky. But given what the options that we've had, I think this is it's certainly a risk worth taking, and I don't know that we could get a better team of experts doing this. So I, for one, am very grateful for everything that you've been doing. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kirby, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about the other species that you've worked with. Have you done immunocontraception? I just heard you mention the white-tailed deer, but is there any other species that have had immunocontraception applied?
So I haven't done IC work on other species. I've done the population density and the ecology work on a whole suite of other species. Yeah. IC is not my specialty. Okay. My specialty is the research side of things. Okay. I think Dr. Herring could speak to that.
Thank you.
I have limited experience with IC as well, aside from reading the papers, but it has been very extensively used in feral horse management in the United States. That's where a large portion of this work has been done, and where this drug started is being used for feral horse management, and it is very widespread and very well researched in feral horse management, and has now crossed into the urban deer management issue.
Great. And further to that, how you mentioned a couple of different drugs, and one was earlier that Christy mentioned had a longer effect. And so, do we know how long the effect this will have?
So the current form of drug, this Zonostat D that we're proposing using, you need to booster it every year. That's the only form that's available right now. There are other varieties of essentially the same drug that have been experimented on to try and extend the duration that the antibodies can maintain in the system. None of those are currently available. Some of them make claims of up to 7 years for a single dosage. And so if those drugs become available, we would absolutely incorporate them into our research plan. But right now, this is the only variety that's available.
Is that due to Health Canada restrictions?
I think it's just due. There was one company that was creating one of them, and then the lab that they were working with shut down, and there wasn't the momentum to carry it on.
Understandable. Okay, thank you.
Thank you,
I just actually one further question is which Planet Earth and which episodes? Because my son's a huge fan.
Planet Earth 2. Have you seen that?
Yes.
Yeah. Have you seen the grizzly bear rubbing against the tree?
Yes.
Yeah. So that's us.
Oh wow.
Yeah, we developed a technique to actually elicit that rubbing behavior in grizzly bears. What you don't see in that is that tree is actually wrapped with barbed wire, so that the bear rubs against it. It doesn't harm the bear in any way, but it pulls off tufts of the outer guard hair, which we then take and we extract DNA from. We can tell exactly who that bear is, who it's related to, where it's been, a whole suite of other info. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. That's totally unrelatable. I'm sorry.
We have enough issues with deer. We're not going to get into bear issues. Some people say the next should be raccoons, but let's just focus on the deer.
One thing at a time.
Okay, Councillor Zelka, please.
Hey, thank you very much, Chair. And thank you so much for this wonderful presentation. It's really great to get an update as to what's happening. I always see, some of you squirreling around out there, and I'm wondering what the heck are they doing? But now, so it's really good to get the update. So the dollars. Just looking at some of the dollars, I mean, when I compare some of the numbers we got from the CRD with respect to their cull of $274,000 for us to take 4 female deer and 7 male deer, versus what we've spent to date with the province, thank goodness that they're actually helping out with this. It's sounding like so far, assuming things go well, that we may actually get a population response that could be positive. So I would love your a sense from you that are we going in the right direction? Like, how are you feeling where we're at in terms of just that? Because since we do know what the population response is for a cull.
Yeah. Me? Yeah, I'm very pleased with how things are going so far. This is cutting edge work. It's not easy to do. It's only been done a handful of times. I think Oak Bay should be really proud that they're on the cutting edge of science, and I know that doesn't hold a lot of political capital, but by the same token, when it comes time to answering to the electorate about what's being done, you're doing the very best work in the world right now. This is cutting edge. We're fairly confident that we've got the right drug and that we're administering it in reasonable doses in terms of numbers to a population that we think is fairly tractable to work with. My personal hypothesis is that there's fewer deer in Oak Bay than people think, based on what the data look like so far, but I could be proved totally wrong. But to be fair, I do feel quite confident. If I didn't, I would not be standing here and telling you I did, because then I'm going to look like a real fool down the road. So I feel good about it so far. If that was the nature of your question about confidence,
much. It is very much. So I did also wanted to just touch on one more thing. What was it? The dollars. Is there any update on? I understand there's one more permit that we're waiting for. I mean, I think it's wonderful. The PUDAC meeting happened, and all the movers and shakers were in that meeting with our mayor. And we had a chance at UBCM to do our best to lobby the province. But I understand if this permit doesn't come through and the rut happens, and then say Christmas time, God forbid, the permit finally comes through, we're delayed another year, it sounds to me. So what's your sense of what we need to do, and best case, worst case, please?
Do you want to tackle this? You want me to tackle this?
Yes.
Okay.
He's the expert.
Just make a mention of the timeline right now, too.
Yeah. So we're in a very tight window right now to execute the immunocontraception. So if we need to have this done before October 19th.
We need to have the first done before October 1st.
Okay, we need to have the first round done before October 1st, which doesn't leave us a lot of time. We have applied for the permit to the province to allow us to do this. They have not yet approved the permit. We've been in discussions with them about what additional information and changes to that permit they wish to see before executing. But to be completely honest with you, we're not in a great position to execute immunocontraception this year based on the delays incurred by the province. And so you're absolutely right that if we do not get the permit immediately and execute, we will not be able to do it this year. We'd be delayed a full year. Okay. We have, I can say, been in discussion with the province that even if we can't get the full dosages out, that if we can get the permit in hand relatively soon, then we can proceed in to just get out as many as we can before our window closes, and they would be satisfied with that. So that's something that we're in negotiation with the province for. So, but let me be very clear, is that we're fully good to go. We have been good to go for a while. We've got everything lined up, the gear in hand, the plan in hand. We're just waiting on the province to come forward and say that this is okay for you to do and you should do it.
Thank you. Councillor Zelka, was there another question?
Can I just add to that just briefly? Jason commented on the fact that we've been ready to go, and we have been since September 1st. But I think another point to be made is one of the reasons why we have not got that final permit. We know that the animal care permit is good to go, but the reason we don't have the general permit is exactly because the province wants this research. The province wants the data to be sound. The province wants us to do due diligence. This is a requirement of the province, and this is a scientific research project, and they are doing due diligence and making sure that occurs. So they're being very careful in that regard. We are ready to go. The validity is all there, but they are requiring more research at this point. That's what's held it up.
So very, very quickly then, are there other CRD cities such as Esquimalt that are participating and maybe possibly ready to go? And is there money that we could draw upon in terms of other grants that to help pay for this?
So Esquimalt, we are also working with Esquimalt, but Esquimalt is methodically working through a number of processes. So 2 years ago, a community survey occurred, 1,100 homes with a 47% return rate, and based on that information, Esquimalt made a decision to engage in 3 years of deer counts. So one of our students is just about to embark on the second robust deer count in Esquimalt. It's a very different level than what is happening here. So they're going to do that this second year, and then they will do it again next year. And at the same time, concurrently with that, they have us working on public education. So again, a robust public education program. But they are not participating at this point because they don't have the data to support that.
And are there any grants we should be applying for to help pay for this from any of the presenters?
Okay.
So the Habitat Conservation Trust Foundation is a granting body that gives dollars to wildlife research. Substantial dollars, in fact. We did apply to them last year to help support this project. It was rejected at that time. They did invite us to reapply this year and address the reasons for their rejections, which was basically a lack of information. But given that we're doing research to obtain information, it's a little circular. But that aside, we do plan to apply to HCTF for a substantial grant that will help to, I think, ameliorate some of the burden placed on Oak Bay for this. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Braithwaite, please.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate that it's fascinating to hear all of this information. It's really great to have you present that to us because I've learned a lot from it as well. I've also really learned that now I know why I can't walk in my backyard because I live right where all those squiggly lines are, and all of those deer congregate in my backyard. I swear to God. So I have a couple of questions. I'm glad that Councillor Kirby asked about how long the contraception lasts. It's only 1 year. My further question to that would be, and I think I know the answer to this, but just to clarify, is that meat edible after a deer has received the IC shot?
So officially, no.
Okay.
The meat is not edible. Based on theory, it should be, but there isn't any scientific evidence that it is safe. And so just, to be safe, no, that meat should not be eaten afterwards. And to expand on the 1 year thing, if you weren't to vaccinate that animal again the next year, it would have a significantly reduced chance of getting pregnant the second year, but not the same efficacy as if it was boosted each year. I don't have the numbers offhand, though.
Then, and I'll ask, I think you're probably going to know the answer to this, my next question, which is, if you're delayed by a year, the drugs that you have in hand right now, do they run out? Like, do they date out, or are they still good next year?
I would have to double check, but I believe they should still be okay. I know of other varieties of this drug that have been used for years and been used effectively for years. Right. The variety that we have right now is a dried form, and so it should have quite a bit of duration, but I'm not positive. I'd have to double check.
Okay, thank you. And then I am really concerned that if you don't get the permit right away, obviously, you only have like 13 days, 14 days to inoculate, then we're pushed back another year, which then increases the deer population probably threefold. Or twofold, let's say, because there's a lot of deer that are having 2 and 3 fawns. It seems to me there's a lot more fawns this year than there ever was before. So I have to then weigh that with all of the people who are saying to me, why aren't we doing something about the deer? You know what I mean? Like I have a real difficult time with that. If we're not going to get that permit and we're not going to be able to inoculate, then that increase in deer is going to be, it's already increased. I mean, I think we've had 48 deaths by car, which is a bad way to cull, already this year, and that's an increase of like 600% in the past 7 years. So do you know where I'm going with that?
I'd like to start to respond to that, but I'm sure Dr. Fisher will follow up. In fact, over the last 4 years, so the 48 number of carcasses at this time of year, 4 years ago, I think it was around 40. So over the last 4 years, there is nothing to actually say that the deer population has increased. We see the deer a lot in the spring and in the summer. We see the fawns out there, but last winter we heard a lot of people saying, where are all the deer? And it felt like there were fewer deer through the winter, anecdotally speaking with a lot of people. The mortality rate of the fawns is, my understanding, very high. So a lot of the fawns that you see at this time of year are not going to make it through the winter. And that's, again, one of the reasons why the research is really important to determine what are the trends? There is nothing to say that the population will increase threefold. We have no scientific basis for that except anecdotally. And the reality is that what some people see in one part, so for someone like you that lives in an area where there's lots of squiggly lines, someone that lives in my area, we don't see them very often at all. So, and then to Dr. Fisher's point, are you seeing the same deer, et cetera? So, the sense of it's increasing and we need to do something, respectfully for after the cull for 2 years, there was no movement towards doing any kind of program. When council decided to engage in this program, which is a really important, and as Dr. Fisher said, a cutting edge program, we need to do it with patience and get those numbers, because at this point we're partway through it.
I totally hear that you say about the patience part, but unfortunately we have residents that are coming to us with a lot of concern, so that's something that we'll have to deal with later, but I'm not sure if you want to have anything to add, because then I have one more thing to say.
Sure, yeah, just real briefly. I fully recognize that this is a very hot topic issue. I used to be the provincial moose caribou blackberry manager for Newfoundland, and moose in Newfoundland is probably about as contentious a wildlife issue. I mean, I used to get death threats all the time. Like, you can talk about contentious. One of the issues we always faced is this bit about people say, well, there's so much more moose than there used to be. And we would provide them with evidence to show that actually those populations are declining fast. What was happening is that because the habitat was crashing out, moose were gathering into areas where people would see them a lot more, right? So you get this clash between the representative heuristic, which means I'm seeing more moose there where there's more moose, and actual data. So what we're trying to do here is to get around that so that you have solid evidence in your hands to say, this is actually the nature of the problem. And I know that's not really satisfactory next week, but we're hoping that like in a couple months, it'll be extra satisfactory.
I just got back from Newfoundland hiking the Long Range Traverse, so I have a lot of moose stories for you. And then I just wanted to say one other thing. I think that the figure of 274,000 for the cull is actually not accurate. I think you probably have the number at the tip of your tongue, maybe Councillor Murdoch, but I know that is actually not an accurate number for a cull of 11 deer. So I think that really we just maybe need more dough for you guys, but not the kind of dough that I know. I couldn't help myself because I knew the mayor was going to say it. Anyhow, thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't see any. One further question, and not about bears, okay?
No, it's very fast.
Or raccoons.
It's just the only question I forgot to mention was that I've heard from just everybody that when they saw the collars, everybody asked, why are they so large? And so you've sort of explained that there's some color tags that are maybe easier to see with the cameras. Is that the purpose of the extra large tags? Because we're all thinking, if my whole computer, my entire life can be in this, why does that thing need to be this big hanging off this steer? Like, it doesn't make sense to me.
Yeah, so this operates off cell tower, right? Those collars have two onboard satellite communication systems on them. One of them that operates like a GPS, like a handheld GPS for geocaching. You know how big that is, right? That gets the signal. And the other one that takes that data and then beams it up to a different satellite and then down to our laptop. So it's basically two handheld GPSs together within that box that hangs underneath. Plus, there's also a radio transmitter in there as well that sends off a radio signal that we can then detect with our receivers so we can find that animal. That's why that box is the size that it is. And then, of course, the battery. Yeah, thank you, Adam. The battery's got to be big enough to allow that collar to live for, how long is the life of those things? Like, is it 3-year lifespan? Yeah. So that's what makes the size of it. And then the size of the band, of course, the bigger it is, the less weight is actually on the animal's neck because it's distributed, right? If you have a thin cord, that's going to pull hard. If you have a big wide band, then it's nice and light on the animal's neck. And then those big color tags are so we can see it on the camera. And we specifically attach those to the collar so it won't be impeding the deer. Most wildlife studies I've been involved in, they all put those great big ones on the animal's ears, and we decided that that was not the thing we wanted to do. So.
Thank you for the explanation.
Okay, well, any further questions after that last one? We are trying to wrap this up. Councillor Murdoch and then Councillor Ney, please.
Just a real quick comment. I think I'm a little bit remiss not in for all the questions I have. I mean, the amount of work done with the amount of volunteer hours and everything else, it's incredibly appreciated. And we're getting value for that money. I don't want to be coming across as the sense that this is a useless piece of time or something. And very appreciative of that. I think it's important, on our part I'm shocked actually, because I don't have strong feelings about the deer, but I have heard, because we're in an election cycle and people talk to you, like every meeting, it is top of mind for so many people in this community. And so I guess all I would leave this with, if this is going to be delayed by another year, which I think can be very hard for people to take, then the next phase of this really has to consider, and it sounds like it can be scientifically supported, that the money goes into actually inoculating the largest number possible of deer in that process, because otherwise this is just going to be, the political will to carry this on is going to be gone. It's taken, it just will. So from what I've heard, so I think it's just important. I'm just passing that information on to you, so that and as a body, that we sort of consider that as the next phase when we're doing our funding, that we sort of tackle this from a reduction perspective and not just a study piece. So thank you.
So just in response to that, just so that you know, we are doing everything that we can. There's been conversations ongoing. So we're doing everything we can to make sure that we get out into the field at least some. So we're working hard on that every single day. And just to your point, I'd like to follow up with that too. The members of the UWSS board members, some of which are here, we've had different ones come and go, some who've been on the board all along. But to pull in the expertise of people like Dr. Fisher and Dr. Herring, we are incredibly fortunate. This really is to go back to Dr. Fisher's comments around, this is cutting edge. This is an opportunity for leadership, and in fact, just to put a number to it, in our estimation, probably through volunteer work, we have, in partnership with Oak Bay, provided the opportunity for this leadership to the tune over and above the $80,000 in the cost share program, about $100,000 in savings for this opportunity. So that's significant, and it's something to be considered. And going forward, doing our best to be out in the field really quickly, to make sure that we can get out now and use that information. If it should be delayed, then I believe that is the goal, is to be out next year, to maximize the information that is being gathered now and to be able to do a much larger number next year.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kilpatrick. Another question?
Yeah, just very quickly, Mr. Mayor, through you, Chair, to staff. It's very concerning to hear about the delay going on and the possibility this may not go through right now. And we are in a three-way partnership with UWSS and our province. And so to staff, I'd like to ask, is there any way I don't know what the province communicates with us, but I'm just wondering if there's any way we could make some inquiry about what's going on. I don't mean to undermine what your relationship is, but it would seem that we would want to understand directly from the province and get an update if this is going to impede the process at this point.
Okay. I can answer that, actually. While we were at UBCM, we did try to contact the minister and the deputy minister at Whistler. They were there. We just couldn't arrange a meeting. I put in a call on the Thursday to the Minister Chief of Staff. Following that, I also contacted the Assistant Deputy Minister. Today at 1:30, I had a teleconference with the Assistant Deputy Minister and two of his staff members. Dr. Fisher was gracious enough to sit in on that, and we did inquire. They were prepared to be as helpful as they could. There was more information that they were gathering. I then also heard from the Chief of Staff, he described himself Ministerial Assistant now, I think different terminology. He called me back just before about 4 o'clock today. Again, he's concerned. There's two remaining issues now, and one was just raised at 1:30 today for me. There's been the technical issues that Dr. Fisher and the UWSS are dealing with. That's a technical issue. And then the new issue that, I did feel a little broadsided by this, is a question about consultation with First Nations. And that it was something that certainly hadn't been brought to my attention until at 1:30 today. So I have a call in and a text into the chief of Songhees to discuss that with him, and to got some looking into the extent of consultation requirements for municipalities with First Nations, and whether or not this, in this kind of case where it doesn't involve land rights or animal rights in the sense, because we're not taking animals like we did last time in terms of culling them. What the duty is, and so I'm hoping to hear back from the chief tomorrow, and so we're moving this along as quickly as we can. So we do have channels of communications with the assistant deputy minister and ministerial assistant. So.
And to your point about being broadsided, we knew before 1:30 today, but this is very new to us as well, that this is a requirement. This seems to be a new requirement, and we were not informed of it when we first put in the permit.
I don't know. There was a suggestion by the ministerial assistant that he suggested. I'm going to take that up with the chief as soon as I can speak to him person to person, and hopefully it's not a showstopper. So we got those two issues at play. So we're working on it, in other words. Okay, no further questions. Thank you all very much. It's been extremely informative, and really appreciate the work. The work that UWSS has been doing. I mean, $100,000 of essentially volunteer time is just an amazing contribution to our community. We're grateful for that. And Dr. Fisher, we're grateful to you, because no doubt the Oak Bay News will run your headline, Oak Bay doing best work in the world. So thank you for that. But I didn't see notes being taken by the Oak Bay News representative. But it's all on tape. So thank you very much. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much. All right. Now, Ms. Hubbard, we're number 6, which is a tree protection. There was a request from you to remove a tree. The application by you to remove that tree was denied. There is an appeal process to council sitting as quasi-judicial, if you will. And so the process that we're going to go through tonight is we're going to hear from our parks manager, Mr. Chris Heideley, who's here, who's also an arborist. And he will set out what the issues are, and then we're going to give you an opportunity to address those issues and speak to the matter before we make any decision here. Thank you very much. Mr. Chris Heideley, welcome.
Thank you, Mayor, and hello, fellow council members. I'll give you a little history on the type of tree we're dealing with right now. It's a deodar cedar, and it's a widely grown ornamental tree, native to Pakistan, Afghanistan area. It's relatively large, it's fast growing, it's well adapted to the West Coast climate. Easily can grow to 25, 35 meters on a lot. Some of its attributes are extremely drought tolerant, so it's probably a suitable tree as we move forward with all the various climatic projections here. This particular case, this particular tree, the municipal arborist looked at it and he felt that the tree didn't meet any of the criteria in Section 6 of the Tree Protection Bylaw. I agree with the municipal arborist's decision there. There may be some opportunity for discussion under Section 6.12 of that of the Tree Protection Bylaw, which is really the permit issuing authority, and it is to remedy an undue hardship attributable to the material and deleterious effect of the tree on an important or significant value located on the subject parcel or on land adjoining the subject parcel. Where it gets a little bit tricky here is that the definition of undue hardship is not clearly defined in the Tree Protection Bylaw. It will be something that will be added. on the bylaw revision that Parks are working on right now. So that's really where we are, is that myself nor the municipal arborist could find a reason to remove the tree under the tree issuing authority as defined in our tree protection bylaw. Hence the reconsideration here at council.
Okay, just before we call upon Ms. Hubbard, could you kind of frame for us what the grounds that we have to overturn a decision should we wish? What are the factors that we can look at, please?
I think it would be prudent to, and this is my suggestion, wait until you have a clear definition of what an actual undue hardship is.
Okay. All right. We have overturned decisions before, correct, Mr. Hidley?
That is correct.
Okay. So we do have a little bit of precedent on that. Ms. Hubbard, I'm going to ask you to come forward, and I'm going to ask you to speak to the issue of undue hardship, because that is the criteria that we have to apply.
Well, I mean,
And you're going to have to stand in front of the microphone so people who are watching at home or in Paris can hear you.
Well, my hardship is the fact that it's a very, very, very messy tree. So it's in my roof, it's in my eaves troughs, it's coming down my downspouts, it's in my perimeter drains. I live on a part, my house is on a part of St. Patrick that is low-lying, so there's quite a few sump pumps around the house to remove the water. There is a sump pump well within about 12 feet of where this tree is constantly shedding its needles. So it fills up the sump pump well, clogs my sump pump, the sump pump breaks, my driveway floods, the garage floods, and I have tenants there. So sometimes if I'm out of town or I'm not right there, this has happened now 3 times since I've owned this property over 7 years. I've replaced sump pumps, and the driveway floods, the garage floods. The tenants have items in the garage. It's a mess, and it takes several days to get this sorted out. The plumbers come, they drain the driveway, put in another sump pump, and it starts all over again. So this is a cycle I've been through, as I say, 3 times since owning this property, and it's due to these needles. It's just completely due to these needles. I have the eaves troughs cleaned twice a year. It just isn't enough. I can't keep up on it. So that's all I've got to say on the matter.
It might help if you can tell us a little bit about the actual water gets inside either the garage, or does it get inside your basement?
Well, it's a crawl space underneath the house. It's 1937 house, and it's a brick crawl space with dirt down there. That's all there is. And then what happens is the one sump pump, which is very close to this tree, works in conjunction with other sump pumps at the rear of the property, and the one at the front that keeps getting clogged pushes the water out of the property into the system to take it away. So as soon as that forward sump pump is plugged, everything backs up through the perimeter drains and up through the sump pump in the rear of the house, and then it all floods into the driveway and into the garage that is right near that rear sump pump. So it's just an issue when this sump pump at the front of the house, most certainly, if it stops, everything stops, and it backs up.
You've described 3 incidences, and can you give us an estimate of how much remediation has cost you every incident?
On an average, between $800 and $1,200.
Okay. And over what period of time have these 3 incidences occurred?
Every other year.
Okay. So over the last 6 years, every other year?
Every every 1 3/4 years.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Any question? No, I'm just going to ask you to stay there, see if councillors have any questions for you. Councillor Nate, please.
So, if there was no tree there, do we know whether you'd still have these flooding issues?
Well, no, I certainly wouldn't. Well, I could potentially, yes, if a sump pump broke. Sure, I could, but this is most certainly contributing to the problem, because the leaves or the needles are backing everything up. It's just I clean the perimeter drains as often as I can. I just had them cleaned a week ago. But these needles are falling down at such a great rate that it's just impossible to keep on top of them. So they're plugging everything up. Without those needles, I certainly wouldn't have the concern. Can I say it would never happen? No, I can't say that. But these needles are very much contributing. Not to mention the fact that when a window or a door is opened, there are more needles inside the house almost than there are outside the house. I mean, this tree is literally less than, it's an enormous tree, and it's literally less than 15 feet away from the house.
Thank you. Any other questions? Councillor Murdoch, please.
I guess it's not the first time we've had nice trees, maybe in inappropriate places in our thing, and had to consider these. One of the things we don't specifically have in our bylaw right now, I don't think, is the ability to request or require replacement of those trees in these instances. Is this a situation where if that tree came down, you'd be able to be in a position to put in some other trees that would be more appropriate for that space?
Sure. I think, this is absolutely a case of somebody planted this tree. It was a cute little tree, I don't know how many years ago. And now this tree is taking over the front portion of my house.
And I guess the second question, because you mentioned the maintenance of the sump pump is not a way to resolve this. You can't just do more frequent cleaning of the sump pumps to alleviate the clogging issue.
Well, I do, and I could, but what's more? Once every 3 weeks, once a month, when those needles start coming down, they just come down at a heck of a rate.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. No other questions? Councillor Kirby, please.
I'm not sure who to ask this of, but just wondering, maybe it's Chris Hidley, just the volume of water that a tree that size would absorb. If it were to be removed, wouldn't it suddenly there be more water? Like, I think the tree is drinking up a lot of water, and it's quite happy to do so in the winter months. I'm just wondering if it's removed, isn't that putting her more at risk? If we were to allow for the removal, wouldn't there be more water? Can I ask that of you, Mr. Hidley?
Sure, through the mayor. Yeah, Councillor Kirby, certainly a possibility. You'd really have to look at the soil profile to determine that on that particular site. And I will take the opportunity to comment on something that Councillor Murdoch said. There is a provision in the bylaw, that section 10, number 1, that does give an opportunity under section 612, which is the undue hardship clause, that does request a single tree to be to replace the tree, and a $500 deposit held for a period of 3 years.
Okay. Any other questions? Councillor Croft, any questions on the tree issue?
Your Worship, Councillor Croft and I have been going back and forth. He's going to interject if he has something, so
Perfect.
We're kind of playing.
And he texted me that by the way, on the deer issue, he didn't have any questions. He texted me that. Good. Okay. Thank you. Another question, please.
Yes.
Yes. Go ahead.
Just to follow up, perhaps for the Director of Engineering, do we know if there's an underground spring in the area? Because we heard from another issue that came up recently that there was an underground spring in another area of the community, and was connected somehow to the possibly to the Bowker Creek watershed. And I'm just wondering if there's any evidence or any prior flooding in the area that would be from an underground spring.
Through your worship, I have no information on that at this time.
Okay, thank you. No other questions. Thank you very much, Ms. Hubbard. And,
Thank you.
Now, Council, we have a choice between two ways to go. One is that we direct the permit be issued, essentially allow the appeal, if we can describe it as that, or we request that the issuance of permit, the application be denied. So we can go either way. We can direct the issuance of a permit, or we can just deny the application that's before us. Go ahead, please.
Through you, Chair, just to Mr. Heidley, do we have a timeline? You suggested that one option may be to just not consider this until such time as we have some clearer, sort of broader policy guidelines to use for the consideration of these sorts of applications. Do we have a time? I do like having those broader policies to sort of to use to give us guidance rather than sort of guessing, but I'm loath to do that if it's a lengthy time frame and being delayed indefinitely.
Thank you, Councillor Murdoch. I anticipate a draft for senior staff review of the revised tree protection bylaw to be done by November.
Okay, so Ms. Hubbard, that opens a possibility that, should you wish, I mean, you have a right tonight to have this decision made, and because you brought the application. On the other hand, it may be worth your while to wait to see what we decide as a council in terms of the definition of hardship. I don't hold out that it would help you. I don't hold out that it will hurt you. But we certainly would have a better handle on once we decide on that policy. Would you prefer to wait? And that would be, let's say, probably late November, early December?
Sure, okay.
All right. So with that, and Ms. Hubbard has said yes, that she prefers to wait. Perhaps what we need is a motion to bring this issue back with notice to Ms. Hubbard on the next time we did look at the issue of hardship. Is that agreeable with everybody? So someone make that motion?
I'll move.
Moved. Moved and
Second.
seconded. Discussion. Yeah, it's on the floor. Go ahead. Discuss.
So I don't understand the motion entirely. To bring it back the next time we're discussing hardship?
No, when we bring it back at the same time that the report from Mr. Heidley comes before us.
Where the definition of hardship, the draft.
Wherein we discuss the policy.
Okay, that's fine. I think what I heard though when Mr. Heidley say is that the first draft for staff review is going to be ready in November. That's often quite a long time before that all the professional review will happen over sometimes months before it comes back to us. So I don't want to set the expectation that that means it's coming to us and therefore to the applicant in that time frame. So is that a correct assessment? I don't want to set the expectations here that we're actually going to discuss this in November if it's going to be quite a bit later than that.
Thank you, Councillor Murdoch. It may be later than that indeed. But in saying that, we've made considerable progress on the revisions. There'll be many. The definition of hardship is just one of many. So I would anticipate that you would certainly be able to see some form of a relatively completed draft around that timeline.
So instead of having it'll just come back when Mr. Heidley's report comes back. Is that agreeable? Okay, and it may be late November, early December, whatever, or earlier if things go smoothly with staff. Yeah, okay. We got that motion. Thank you, Mr. Jones. Question. I'm going to call a question. Any discussion first? No discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. So, Ms. Hubbard, thank you very much for being here tonight, and you'll be informed when this is going to come back on the agenda. Okay. Thank you. Next is the fire truck tender award recommendation. And there's a recommendation that we give the award to Victoria Ford Alliance. The deputy chief is here in the absence of the chief. This is a pickup truck, a half-ton pickup, and that your recommendation is to purchase also the emergency light siren console to Sigma Safety in the amount of $41,000, correct?
That's correct, Your Worship.
Okay.
Move the recommendation.
Move the recommendation.
Second.
Thank you very much. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Oak Bay Fire Bylaw update. It's a report on Bylaw 3803.
Excuse me, Chair. I have to declare a conflict of interest.
Now, we were discussing the possibility of dividing the two, Councillor Zelka, or is there a part of this you feel you have no conflict and another part you have?
Yes, for the discussion of the first bylaw, with the bylaw with the number, I'm in conflict of interest because I work for the emergency program, the Provincial Emergency Program for Emergency Management British Columbia, and I work directly with the Office of the Fire Commissioner, who I believe is at certain times of the year or certain times of emergency programs, chief to our chief. So I have to step out of discussions.
Okay, so there's no way to separate. Okay, thank you very much. We'll just wait for you to recuse yourself physically. This is item number 8. Could you give us a very quick overview, Deputy, on this here?
Yes, Your Worship. Bylaw 3803 has not been updated significantly for a number of years, and the recent, in 2016, the Fire Safety Act achieving and receiving royal assent, however, still not in force, has necessitated a review and an updating of our bylaw. We engaged the services of Dave Mitchell and Associates, and the bylaw has also been run through by our legal counsel. And what this will do is ensure that our bylaw will be in line with the new Fire Safety Act when it comes into force later this year. And it is dated, the bylaw will be dated for December 31st. We're looking at this time not to have first reading, but for information. There's a couple of small changes I'd like to advise Your Worship and Council of. The first one that I'll show you is on, actually the only significant one is on page 11 under section 46. And in the first sentence, there's just an error from formatting during our review of this document. And you can see in the first sentence of section 46, it mentions error reference source not found. That should simply refer to section 48.
Okay.
So that's the only significant change. This new bylaw will allow us to continue on with all our services that we currently provide. We will also it will also take into account the new firefighter, the playbook put out by the Officer of the Fire Commissioner. We, just so yourself and council knows, we're in full compliance with everything that has been contemplated in the new Fire Safety Act. And I won't get into inspections right now. I'll wait until Councillor Zelka's back. But as far as all our firefighting operations and the establishment bylaw, this won't change anything that we currently do. There has been the elimination of the local assistance to the Fire Commissioner. That's one of the large changes and allows local government to handle that as for inspectors as opposed to appointing us as provincial local assistants.
Okay, thank you very much, Deputy. Now, procedurally, Mr. Jones, the suggestion with the correction that was made by or suggested by the Deputy, we would give it first reading tonight, or we would bring it back for first, second, and third reading another night.
Your Worship, we don't have the bylaw in front of council tonight, so this is for information. So the motion to direct staff to prepare and renew the revised draft bylaw would be appropriate.
Oh, I see. So the bylaw, we have a draft there. Okay. So we would just direct staff to bring forward a bylaw.
That's correct, Your Worship.
Okay, good. Thank you. Maybe someone can make that
Move
motion.
the recommendation.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. Yes, go ahead, please.
Just a quick
Councillor
question.
Murdoch.
Just want to confirm, because there are specific rules laid out here. There's no changes required to the collective agreement. It's all in compliance with the rules as laid out there.
Through the chair, Councillor Murdoch, no, our collective agreement and the wording and the positions have been reviewed and are in order.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Ready to call a question? All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Councillor, you can return. Okay, we move on to number 9, which is the tender of the sanitary sewer main lining. Quick overview from you, please, Director of Engineering, Mr. Horan.
Sorry, excuse me, Your Worship. This was broken into 2 parts. This bylaw, there was the fire operation bylaw.
I'm sorry.
And then there's the fire prevention and life safety bylaw.
Okay, so let's give us that introduction there, please.
Okay, so the second part of this is the fire prevention and life safety bylaw, and this encompasses all the areas where we have duties for inspections, smoke alarm installation and maintenance, where we establish fire watches after fires, accumulation of combustible materials, all those sorts of things. Now, I do have one change, similarly to the first bylaw. I have one change. If yourself and the council could refer to page 11 on the second section. And we look at 48D. And it states a fire fueled solely by propane, natural gas, or charcoal briquettes. So the or charcoal briquettes is going to be removed, and that will keep this bylaw in line with the Parks and Beaches bylaw that was recently revised. Okay. And so those 2 will agree. Additionally, we have house numbering. Will be encompassed in this bylaw. And then it talks about there is a charges and fees schedule attached to this document as well in Schedule A. What this does is it gives our inspectors some more tools to use in the unusual situations where we have non-compliance. When you look at that document and see such a schedule of fees, we want to assure yourself and council that voluntary compliance and voluntary compliance will continue to be applied. This won't be a revenue generator, and it's not meant to. It's not meant to be, like I say, generating any revenue. It will simply be used, and I'll use an example. Somebody won't get their replace a fire extinguisher in a public building, for instance, and for us to have written a provincial order would be over the top for enforcement. Now we could say, okay, well, you'd be looking at a fine of $250, so they would simply replace the fire extinguisher or have it inspected, which would improve the fire and life safety, which is certainly our goal.
Okay.
Also, this is a risk-based model, so based on the risk of the particular occupancy, that would determine the frequency of inspections.
Thank you very much. Mr. Jones, what should the appropriate motion be for this?
Your Worship, there's no need for a further motion.
This is just an in-pipe
Correct.
information.
Yeah, thank you.
Any questions? Go ahead, please, Councillor Zelka.
Thank you, Chair, and I appreciate the opportunity to ask a question about life safety here in Oak Bay. The question is with respect to the short-term rentals. I bring this up because at UBCM there was a wonderful presentation on what Vancouver is doing, what Tofino is continuing to do in this, and trying to find an area of dealing with and regulating and finding a way to work with our residents who at times are turning their residential houses into hotels, it seems, my opinion. And I see that in the NFPA, National Fire Prevention Association, I sent a link through a prepared deputy for this question ahead of time with a reference to the article in the NFPA journal just last month. They basically were bringing forward some of the concerns from the fire building construction and safety codes, NFPA 5000 and the NFPA 101 life safety codes, which potentially could be applied in this area of short-term rentals. And it sounds to me like NFPA don't really have a suggestion on what to do as to whether to treat short-term rentals as a hotel or treat it like of certain classifications, which implies certain commercial appropriate equipments that need to be in place, or treat it like a residential properties, which I guess would be rather low needs in terms of or minimum needs, or something else. In Vancouver, one of the mechanisms that they took with respect to the whole business licensing process with respect to short-term rentals was that they insisted from a life safety, health and safety perspective, that the fire requirements had to be higher than it would be for residential homes. So does this proposed bylaw, is it flexible enough to allow us, once we get to the point of regulating, I presume, short-term rentals, to accommodate flexibility in this area once we decide what to do with short-term rentals?
Through the chair, Councillor Zelka, one of the challenges that we would find with single-family dwellings without a designation as a business, if they were running it there, would be access for inspections, because we don't have any powers to enter a single-family dwelling. However, if there was a zoning change, or I shouldn't say zoning, if there was a designation change to a building that made it a business or a commercial occupancy, then we would have powers under the legislation to be able to enter and inspect.
Thank you.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Thank you very much. That's an information item. And thank you very much, Deputy. Really appreciate that information. And you're also, the revision of that bylaw will move us forward. Before we move on, that was number 8. Typically, we would go from 8 till 9 and the numbering system. But I think our colleague in Paris is flagging a bit. And he had been, he was going to excuse himself after 15. Item 15. So I'm wondering if we could bring item 15 forward to deal with that now.
Move to do that.
Okay, and so in that way, Councillor Croft can go back to bed. Okay, move, second it. Okay, so we'll deal with that next if this passes. Discussion? All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Okay, Councillor Croft, this is the last item for you. And then it'll be time to have the petit pain, the cafe au lait. Mr. Anderson, this is a secondary suite policy regulation proposal to award a contract. You have a report. Can you give us an overview of the report and what the recommendation is?
Certainly, Your Worship. Thank you. So as part of Council's direction, we are undertaking the process associated with the secondary suite review of policy and regulation. And as part of that, we had issued a request for proposal to initiate that study. And we received 3 proposals as part of that exercise. And through the evaluation of those proposals, staff are recommending that Urban Systems be awarded the contract for undertaking that study. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Anderson. Are there any questions of Mr. Anderson on his report or what he's just said? Okay, I don't see any questions. Oh, question? Yep, go ahead, Councillor Zelka, please.
Thank you very much. With respect to the proposed contract, I get the impression that that this contract can be ended at any time for any reason. Is this true? And if not, what are the options we have potentially for ending the contract? Should our decision on maybe after the election possibly want to go on a different direction?
Yes, through Your Worship. The contract language usually provides for either party to come forward and try to end the contract. There has to be mutual agreement with respect to that, is my understanding.
Okay, thank you very much for that question. I'd entertain a motion, please.
I would move that consideration of this award be deferred to a council meeting in November.
Second.
Sorry, could you say that again, please?
I move that the consideration of this award be deferred to a council meeting in November.
Oh, I see. Okay. Typically, the motion and the recommendation is done first, but okay, that's fine.
I guess
discussion?
I'd like to speak against the motion, given that we have spent 4 years getting to this place.
Okay.
We've debated strategic plans and budgets and the merits of secondary suites and in a housing crisis for 4 years. And we're finally at the place where we're about to award an RFP to begin the process. And you want to undermine the public process that we've been through and the political process we've been through at this council and this council's decisions year in and year out about secondary suites, where we're the final municipality in this region to get on board and regulate the safety, the health and safety of our residents. And I am appalled that this is the direction that you'd like to take our community in. I'm appalled, and I am frustrated that we are yet again debating the merits of regulating secondary suites. It's shocking to me. We have a housing crisis in this region, and that you can have no concern for people that have zero or facing a zero vacancy rate is appalling. I am so disappointed in that motion, and that this, I'm not surprised, but I'm disappointed, and I will not support the motion.
Perhaps I should motivate.
Pardon me?
Perhaps I should motivate that motion.
I'm not sure what that means, but I think Councillor Zelka had...
I would be fine to defer to Councillor Murdoch.
And then I also had Councillor Ney. Did you want to speak to the motion?
Sure, and I've said before, I'm in support of us going down the legalization of suites route. I've also been very firmly of the belief that should be done as part of a wider housing consideration for more housing options than just suites. It's core to this particular election. That decision, frankly, it's right on the table there, which way we want to go. We have 98% of the way through a council term, of which there's been a carrying capacity of the 4 votes to pass this at any time. We are talking about a deferral of 1 month for the next council to take this on and own it. My primary concern of this isn't the terms of reference, which I think are fine, but it's just locking in the next council for that decision for the next term. And I don't think it's financially responsible, frankly, to sign a contract where we are signing $60,000 and really locking us into a process that the next council may feel is too narrow, that frankly doesn't address the housing options that this community needs. So I stand by this. I don't think this is in any way disrespectful to that request. I think that there's a philosophical gap that the next council is going to have to deal with. How do we address that housing crisis? And I think it has to be dealt with more broadly than legalizing suites. It has to be looking at other housing options. It has to look at how do we actually provide the housing options that we need in our community in addition to secondary suites. So, we can have a vote on this. I think I have a feeling of which way it's going to go, but I think it's important for us to give that choice to the elected council that's going to be dealing with it.
Thank you. I asked Councillor Croft if he could hear the motion, and he did, and he asked to speak to it. Councillor Croft.
Thank you, Mayor. I cannot support this motion. The amount of work that has been put in by this council and the previous council at looking at moving forward on pre-existing suites. We have suites. They should be regulated. To put this off to a future council should not change the need to do what exists and what we should be doing, just like our duplexes. So I find the whole notion that we're going to do a housing strategy is a way to completely postpone the whole process of secondary suites, of duplexes, of heritage conservation. And to put this at this time for our council to defer, I just could not support
Are we ready for the motion? Councillor Ney, Zelka, and then back to Kirby. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Croft, by the way.
Well, I guess I'm just confused by Councillor Murdoch's motion, because Councillor Murdoch, he voted in favor of the OCP, then he voted in favor of the strategic priorities, where we had secondary suites at the top of the list after the HCA. You voted for the budget, where we put $60,000 aside to do this consultation. We had an understanding we'd go through with this, you do the HCA, and the secondary suite would follow. You voted in favor of the motion when we put the secondary suites forward initially in March. And then at the 11th hour, you pull out and you start talking about housing strategy, which is a separate line item in the implementation of the OCP. So then you start to talk about we need other housing options, we need a plan, but we've got the framework in the OCP. We just need to give direction to staff to carry out fix the zoning bylaw so it'll align with the OCP. Here we've had this. It's 10 years, and I'm baffled actually what's going on here. Why you would pull this at the 11th hour, but 85% of our community has said they want us to regulate this, and I said I would in the last election, and I'm prepared to honor what we said we do and follow through with this. So I'm going to vote against your motion.
Councillor Zelka, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'm taking a sort of a systems perspective on this. As pointed out by the province recently, with the change of government, they came forward with a 30-point plan looking at to deal with from a systemic perspective, looking at with the whole question of housing affordability. I hear Councillor Kirby when she suggests we have a housing crisis. I am absolutely appalled that 7% of all single-family homes in Victoria sit empty. I am not happy. I shouldn't say appalled. I am not happy that 5%, according to the Canada Census, of all houses in Oak Bay sit empty. That is housing stock already built, sitting there, that this approach is not going to touch. However, from the provincial perspective, with their 30-point housing affordability option, one of the ways they wanted to deal with getting that stock into use was the vacancy tax. At UBCM, I could not support a local application of the vacancy tax. I voted in favor of the province moving forward with the vacancy tax. In addition to all 30 points, because working together, it actually spoke directly to all the systemic issues having to deal with housing affordability, from stabilizing the market, which was, amongst other things, the vacancy tax, cracking down on tax fraud and closing loopholes, building, and then finally, once basically you stop the money sloshing around, then building homes that people need. I'm not talking about social housing. I'm talking about basically making sure that we actually have, from the perspective of planning, from the perspective of all this incredible staff resources we have at our hands, of actually building what we would like to see in our community and see it and used, and know that our teachers and our folks working in the various businesses actually can afford to live here or live near here. And of course, a part of this also includes rapid transit. So I would definitely want to approach this from a systems perspective. And that's why when Council chose to just deal with one small piece of the OCP as opposed to take a methodical approach, I have a hard time understanding quite what my fellow councillors are doing. I will be voting in favor of the deferment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kirby, and then Councillor Braithwaite, then, please.
I've just been reviewing my notes to try and remind myself of all the votes where we've talked about this, and how tired the community must be of the constant ongoing debate over this issue, when we clearly decided and had a massive consultation effort to create the OCP in 2014, and this council supported that document, and then or the previous council did, and here we are 4 years later having the same conversations, and we still don't have a zoning bylaw change, and it's one of the top things that's recommended to be done, and we'd like it to be done, and it wouldn't be delayed if we didn't have to have this debate every single time. If we could unanimously as a council decide we want some action on housing, then maybe we would see some action, but we can't see action if we've constantly got debate up here. And I might remind you also, Councillor Murdoch, that you voted in favor of this. It wasn't always a split vote. There was a 5-2 vote fairly recently. So I'm sorry, you're confusing me where you are on this issue. I don't see your definitive support of secondary suites in any of these debates we've had over all along the way. I'm just so frustrated that we've reached this point where I thought this would be an easy done decision. This is directing staff to get on with the work that we've been meant to do for the last 4 years and been obstructed by your appeals for a housing strategy or a housing, what did you just call it again? Like something new. There's a new term there, some other language. I don't know what you want, but I would like to see some action. And as you were mentioning earlier about studies and research and all these delays that is going into the deer management process, no action, you're doing the same thing, but this is obstructing housing for people, housing for families, housing for students, for seniors. This is really critical, a critical need. It's a right for people to have housing, and that's what you're obstructing. I'm going to stop there.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Braithwaite, please.
Thank you. Yeah, obviously, we all know that secondary suites are absolutely a practical way of offering housing choices and options within our community. They're here right now. We all know that. I've said all along, and so it won't come as a surprise to you, that I can't support a secondary suite strategy without looking at it in a bigger picture with the housing plan. I've said that from the beginning. I've always voted against this, so it shouldn't come as any surprise for you for that. And I sit here and I go, you know what? There could be 6 new faces sitting around this table in 5 weeks. 6 new faces. What happens if they have a different idea? What happens if they want to have a look at a housing strategy rather than just focus in on a secondary suite? So secondary suite strategy, that's kind of how I look at it. And so then I think, you know, if we're committing $60,000 to a strategy that then might go by the wayside because a different council is sitting around the table, then that's not being fiscally responsible to me. So for me to wait that 5 weeks, it just makes sense to me to wait the 5 weeks. And so I have to support it. And again, because I voted to support a housing plan or a housing strategy all the way along. So I understand that there's other feelings around the table, but that's just my feeling and what I hear from the community.
Thank you. We're ready for the vote. I think a lot of us have had a lot of say, so how about a vote? No, Councillor Murdoch wants to have something to say, and then you can have a say, and then I think we'll call the vote.
Yeah, I don't want to take much time. I just think I have to clarify a little bit of some of there's legitimate questions raised by Councillor Ney in terms of what my intention is. I absolutely, so the votes have come for different things. I supported the terms of reference for the secondary suites. I support legalizing secondary suites. My primary goal this term has been to complete or move significantly forward on the aspects of the end of the official community plan. We started on an infill housing strategy, which I supported. That got pulled. We haven't done anything for the last few years, and then this is coming at the last hour. If this was two years in, I'd be all for this and trying to get this done. We are 5 weeks away from it being done. The question was also given, the question that talking about the housing strategy in the OCP. The housing strategy in the OCP refers to affordable and special needs housing and pieces. That's not what I'm talking about. I am talking about what we were originally discussing, but broader, of codifying in zoning the intentions of the OCP and getting it done. That means duplexes, townhouses, multifamily developments. What do we want as a community? And I think this is an incredibly important part for us to actually get as a community to lead our way forward. This is not obstructive. I'm not denying the critical need for this, but I see a path that we can get there to all the housing needs of our community, the ones that we actually need. Secondary suites exist. Yes, we need to legalize them, but we also need many other housing options, and this defers that discussion for years. And I don't think that's responsible, and it certainly should be the responsibility of the next council. So I appreciate, I think I've heard everybody. I'm not going to win this argument today, but I think I had the right to clarify my intentions here. It is actually to get to the job that we had to do this term, which was codifying the official community plan into zoning and bylaw regulations. And I hope you have a chance to do that next term.
Ready for the question?
I just have one final comment. I just think that there's some serious confusion across from me regarding what an OCP does and what a housing strategy does. I think we have a plan in front of us that was identified by the community. A housing plan is our official community plan, and there are some specific recommendations in the appendix at the end that say exactly what we should be doing, and one of the first ones is secondary suites. And that's what we're starting to do. And to delay that is contradictory to the OCP, which was decided upon by this community, and finally getting some action on it. And to see you guys try to obstruct that doesn't make any sense to me. And to call it all these different names and confuse the public. What is an OCP? What's a housing strategy? What is codifying the zoning regulations? Like, this is why we're not getting anywhere, and why we have a divided community that's confused about what we're doing here. We need to talk in the same language and work together towards, if you really believe truly that secondary suites should be legalized, then why didn't you support this 3 years ago? Like, when we started talking about this at the budget table.
Thank you. All in favor? Opposed? Okay. And, sorry, did I hear something from Councillor Croft?
Councillor Croft said, sorry.
Opposed, thank you. Councillor Croft, Councillor Kirby, Councillor Ney, and myself opposed. The motion fails. Is there another motion?
I would move approval of the recommendation from staff that the contract for secondary suites project be awarded to Urban Systems based on the Urban Systems request for proposal submission in the amount of $59,500.
Moved and seconded. Do we need any discussion? I think we had it the last motion. Okay, I see no hands. Do you wish to address this motion, Councillor Croft? Nobody here has got their hand up to discuss it. Okay. Okay, to speak. Okay, all in favor? So was that from that cell phone?
That was in favor, yes.
Thank you very much. And opposed? Councillor Braithwaite, Murdoch, and Zelka opposed. The motion passes. And as they say in France, bonne nuit, mon cher ami. All the best. Thank you very much for joining us, Councillor Croft. I think you've earned a little lie-in today. Bonjour, là. Okay. Thank you. We're going to return.
Au revoir.
Thank you. We're going to go to 9. That's the tender of sanitary sewer mainlining. Mainlining used to have a different connotation than it does now, I guess.
Oh dear,
let me just see. I'm going to just wake up
Bad
my
jokes.
iPad here. So,
Move the recommendation
Second.
that the contract for sanitary sewer and storm drain lining be awarded to Martech Underground Services.
okay, moved and seconded. Moved and seconded. I have a question for Mr. Haran. Mr. Haran, this is one way to fix our sewer pipes. You're pulling a new lining in it. Is this the future?
Your Worship, our annual sewer rehabilitation budget in the capital budget, what we do is we look at the need for the next year, and then we try to choose the appropriate replacement strategy. Sometimes a trench, like a conventional full dig is required for the highest priority sewer pipes that need to be replaced. Sometimes it's most appropriate to do something like cured in place lining. Other times there's other techniques like pipe bursting, where you replace the pipe and make it bigger without having to do a trench. So every year, and as we do our capital planning, we try to assess the best rehabilitation methods for the highest priority pipes in the planning process.
Thank you very much. Any idea what percentage of our pipes this will represent? What you're looking at here?
That is math that I have not done.
Okay, fair enough. I didn't want to put you on the spot, and I apologize for doing that. All right, any other questions for Mr. Haran? Yep, go ahead, Councillor Braithwaite.
I'm just astounded that the only other bid that came in was like 104% higher. Do you have any explanation about that, or?
Through your worship, yeah, both of the bidders are are quite well known to us and very reputable. There's a lot of reasons why this could happen. I don't have the specifics for why. Sometimes it's just as simple as that we have a timeline in the request for proposal in the tender where we want the work done by a specific time. So sometimes it's a matter of they're committed elsewhere or they're operating in another part of the province or a different province, so it would just cost more for them to change their plans.
Thank you very much. I see no other hands and questions. Yes, I see another hand with a question. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. First, a comment. I see you have an engineer's ring on your finger, Chair. I sometimes wonder about the questions you ask with respect to engineering.
Oh, yeah. I'm a chemical engineer.
Yeah, well, that explains it. So the question I have for Director of Engineering is, you make reference to the successful sewer and storm main pipe rehabilitation program that we've been through. This is more touching on the water pipe project. Is it possible to just get a brief A-OK, it's all finished, or we still have more work to do on that water pipe project?
Through the chair, I assume you mean...
it is kind of out of order, because how does it arise from this?
Well, the first line talks about the successful pipe project, but I guess I could ask the question offline. All right, thank you very much.
That's probably a good idea.
That's very good, thank you.
Okay, thank you. There's a motion on the floor to accept the recommendation. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. The next item is Streets and Traffic Bylaw Amendments, U-Bike operations in Oak Bay. And does staff want to just speak to this? Mr. Haran, that's your department. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just a quick introduction. After the April Committee of the Whole, Council directed staff to prepare the required amendments to the Streets and Traffic Bylaw that would allow a bike share system to operate in Oak Bay. So that's the report that's in front of you and the draft amendment to the bylaw. Just one quick change is we're just recommending a slightly different motion than is presented in the original report, and that motion would be that staff bring the amended bylaw as presented in the staff report from Director of Engineering Services on 10 September 2018 forward for consideration at an upcoming meeting of Council.
Okay. Someone wish to move that?
Moved.
Moved. Seconded. Discussion. Go ahead, Councillor Murdoch.
Thank you, through Chair. Just a quick question. When U-Bike was here talking to us at Committee of the Whole and we were discussing the parameters, one of the issues I raised at that point was whether they were willing to, given that they're using municipal facilities and space and not paying taxes as part of the thing, just a business license, whether they would be willing to invest money in bike racks that we are so desperately in need of in this community. And they said yes, they would be willing to do that. So is that, I appreciate it's probably not part of a bylaw because that would be inappropriate, but is there any piece of this in the discussion that we could tie in on these sorts of businesses that are operating without storefronts and therefore without taxes to the business license process, that the expectation is they contribute as they've offered to do?
Through your worship, so step one for us is the direction around the bylaw amendments, which allows us to start working on but the agreement, the operating agreement, which would be for a trial period of 1 year, which includes the details such as how many bikes are available, what's the relocation, the rebalancing policy, what are the rules around what areas can and can't be used for parking and so on. So if the council wishes to have some other kinds of guidance related to that agreement, we'd be willing to take that direction.
Would you need that direction here or just at future time when that agreement comes forward?
Your Worship.
Mr. Jones.
That's something we certainly have heard from U-Bike, that they'd be willing to consider that. I think one of the things we can have a conversation with them about is the timing around that. I mean, if they are entering into a one-year trial period, there may be some hesitancy to put funds into some capital infrastructure that may be difficult to move around. But we'll have a conversation. They've heard that message, not only from us, but Victoria and the University of Victoria and other places. So we'll definitely do that. Timing, I think, could be a little bit up in the air, though.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I would move the revised motion as laid out by Director Haran.
That's all right. We have a motion on the floor, do we? No.
Second.
Okay. So I thought Councillor Zelka moved.
We did.
Yeah, I thought so. Yeah, and that's the suggested motion. All right. So we know where we are in time and space. Let's call that question. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Thanks, Mr. Haran. Now it just dawned on me that the next one is building reconciliation forum sponsorship opportunities. Has to do with a request from University of Victoria for money from council. And I have a sessional teaching gig up there. Mr. Jones, does that put me in a possible conflict?
Your Worship, you would not have a pecuniary interest in that.
No, I don't. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I will continue on that. So this is a request for Build Reconciliation Forum. They want a sponsorship, and the amount suggested in the sponsorship is, Ms. Varela?
Two amounts were put forward, Your Worship, 8,000 and 10,000.
8,000 and 10,000. Okay.
Staff did reach out today just on an informal basis to Saanich staff to see if council directed some sort of financial contribution, if there were opportunities for partnering. Staff could further that conversation if council gave such direction.
Okay.
Again, no commitment from Saanich, but we could have a conversation.
So maybe we adjourn this till our next meeting. In the meantime, you have a conversation with Saanich on that. Is that agreeable with people? Okay.
I would move that we ask or
Refer
direct
to staff.
staff to seek out a partnership opportunity for sponsorship of the Netasmat Building Reconciliation Forum.
Okay, thank you. Moved and seconded that is referred back to staff for to explore what you just mentioned. Thank you. Speak to the motion. Anybody? Go ahead, Councillor Murdoch.
Just a very quick question, or just an observation maybe to guide. I'm not entirely clear on what financial mechanism we would use to pay for this kind of sponsorship. Is it a grant or is it some other tool? If it's a grant, it sort of clearly falls outside of our line of grant policy. So I think we need to sort of make sure that we're considering it within that policy. But if it's something else, I think that just should be a report that comes back if staff finds some way to move forward with this.
Okay, ready for the question? All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. CRD Arts and Culture Bylaw. This is the removal of the town of Sydney. Right? By the purpose. Not removing it like from the CRD, but from the bylaw. Sorry. And adding souk. Okay? Did I capture that? I can. Okay. So it's being asked to support that by the CRD. Okay. Can someone move that?
What is the motion exactly? Is it for us to approve that, or for direct the CRD director to approve it, or what is the motion here that we should be doing?
The request is to give consent to the adoption of the bylaw in accordance with Section 346 of the Local Government Act to remove the town of Sydney as a participant of this service and to add the district of Souk as a participant.
Yep. I would move to give consent.
Second.
Okay. Thank you very much. Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. Oh, yes. Sydney's out. Well, it'll be on the next ferry. All right, so report of, we have a development application at 43 McQuina. In place of Ms. Jensen, who's going to speak to this? Mr. Anderson? Oh, Mr. Anderson? Thank you very much. And is the applicant here? Yes. Hello. Thank you. Yeah, we need a motion.
I'll need a
go
motion
past
to move
10:30.
us to 11.
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Okay, because we have to stop at 10:30 unless we have a motion to go past 10:30, which we just did. Okay, so the applicant is here. Mr. Anderson, please give us the overview.
Thank you, Your Worship. We have a development permit application 21 for 43 McQuina Street, the purpose of which is to undertake remediation and landscaping works along the waterfront within our shorelines development permit area. The approval of such would allow works to remediate the bank along the shoreline to occur within our current fisheries window. And our staff are considering the proposed works to be supportable and would recommend approval as provided for in option 1. Thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions of Mr. Anderson to begin with? See no questions.
Move approval.
Okay. I was going to say, is there any questions for the applicant, but we got a motion on the floor. Moved, seconded.
Second.
Discussion. All in favor? Yep. Councillor Braithwaite.
So
Go
I just want to make sure that I understand what was said in the application, which is that all the work has to be done by October 1st. Is that correct?
Yes, that's the fisheries window.
Wow.
Okay.
Go fast.
If this passes, we also wish you good luck. Okay, all in favor? Opposed? Good luck. It passes. Thank you very much, and all the best with the work. And I know there's a small window.
We got a guy. He's ready to start tomorrow.
Okay. Thank you very much. Really appreciate that. Heritage referral of property on the Community Heritage Register. Who do we look for here quickly? Again, you, Mr. Anderson. There you go. Just a high-level overview.
Absolutely. Your Worship. So what we have is a building permit for a property within the Heritage Register, and the permit is to replace windows. This had been brought forward to the Heritage Commission, who on September 11th, who had made a recommendation to support the works that are underway. So the motion is that Council has not yet considered the application, and staff recommend that no further action be taken toward consideration of the heritage value of the home. That's the recommendation.
Okay. So
I'll move the recommendation.
Move. The recommendation's been moved. Is there a seconder?
Basically, the motion is to not refer it to the Heritage Foundation.
Been seconded. Okay. There's some puzzled faces around here. Puzzled face number 1, Councillor Kirby.
I just was needing clarification.
Okay.
I misheard the recommendation.
Okay.
And so I was a little confused. Sorry.
You're unpuzzled.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm unpuzzled. It's all good.
Thank you very much. Any other discussion about this motion? Yes, go ahead, Councillor Zelko.
So just to confirm, this is just merely to proceed with the window replacement or upgrades or whatever it is, and nothing else.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Ready for the question? Councillor Murdoch?
I just want to make a comment that was at the Heritage Commission, and it's just very much appreciate the applicant doing this work and maintaining this house. It's 126 years old, one of the oldest houses in the community, so it's nice to see this kind of continuous refresh happening.
The applicant here? Oh, thank you very much. It's great.
Our pleasure.
Call a question. All in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. And all the best with it. Thank you. And thanks for preserving the wonderful residents. We skip on to number 16, please. And this is correspondence that refers to 2 DVPs a little down the road.
Move receipt.
Okay. Moved and seconded. Thank you. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. New business, verbal reports. Okay. Councillor Kirby, please.
I've just circulated a notice of motion by email earlier this evening, and I just wanted to make sure that everybody received it. It's a notice of motion regarding the review of remuneration.
Remuneration.
Yes.
And so that'll come back at the next council meeting now that notice has been given. Thank you. Go ahead.
Is it appropriate that the motion be read?
Not necessarily, no. No, it's just a notice.
Just a notice.
It's a notice that if people want, they can get copies later and read it on their own. How? Well, Councillor Kirby's going to give it to staff, and staff can just make copies of it. Well, okay. No report from me. Other verbal report. Oh, I do have new business. I should say it. Sorry, I have some new. You have some more new business, Councillor Kirby? Okay, so you might want to. It's the childcare thing. So I don't think that, you know, if staff doesn't require a motion, perhaps if there's a consensus here that we just ask staff to bring back a quick report, high-level report as to what the program of $1 million facilities for childcare encapsulates, and how we might get that process going if there's an interest. Yep. So there's a consensus we do that? All right. Thank you very much. So do you need anything other than a consensus, Ms. Varela? Thank you. So other verbal reports. Go ahead, Councillor Kirby.
Keep this extremely brief, but I just wanted to acknowledge the mayor for coming to UBCM and in my new role as in my day job as a promoter of grants for childcare for municipalities, school districts, and First Nations communities across BC. Yes, it's my dream job. But he came up to UBCM and helped me present, well, not me, helped my colleagues present on behalf of the District of Oak Bay, because we are one of only three municipalities or local governments in all of BC that own and operate our own childcare. And that's to be commended. And I think it's actually, research shows that nonprofit daycare, such as the care that is provided at the Paddington Station, is at a higher standard than, in general, than private for-profit care. And so that is setting the bar very high, and we have an excellent level of service through Paddington Station. And our community benefits extremely from having that daycare there, which the mayor was able to articulate to the crowd. And, of course, did it in a very entertaining fashion, where he was the rec center over here and on the slide. Anyways, long story, it was very good, very well, very much appreciated by the attendees at the policy session, and I got lots of positive feedback as a result, so I appreciate that. And I hope that the District of Oak Bay in future, when I'm no longer on council, will pursue these grants of up to $1 million and 100% provincial funding and an ongoing intake process, which I've said so many times this last week at UBCM that I've lost my voice.
Thank you. Well, I must admit, it was a moment of great pride when I spoke about the Neighborhood Learning Center and our wonderful daycare and out-of-school care. And it really is. I mean, the people there were just amazed with how well we'd done. And so I count it as one of the key achievements for families here in Oak Bay for that. So, and I thank you for making it easy by putting the slide together. And it wasn't that difficult to pretend to be the rec center. All right, so anything else? We're going to move on to the DVPs. The first one is Westtown. So if we could please have a motion to authorize issuance of the DVP, and then I'll see if there's any members of the public who wishes to speak.
Move to authorize the issue of the DVP with respect to 2939 Westtown Road.
Second.
Okay, moving second. Is the applicant here? No applicant. Oh, that's you. Okay. And anyone wish to speak to this? Okay, does anyone have any questions for the applicant? Are we ready for the question? Okay, all in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you very much. Thank you. DVP, well, essentially a lot of zeros in the 85. On Dorset?
Move that Director of Building and Planning be authorized to issue DVP 85 to 2785 Dorset.
Second.
Moved and seconded. The applicant here? Anyone wish to speak to it? We do have a letter on this one. Okay, discussion? All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Bylaw, third reading and adoption. Oh, so we would just, we're going to defer 21, right? That's the Runnymede one? Do we need a motion to defer it, or it just goes along with the, no? Okay, thank you. First, second, and third reading of the procedure bylaw.
Move first reading of the procedure bylaw 4715.
Thank you.
Second.
Move. All in favor? Opposed? Not opposed.
Move
second reading, please.
For bylaw 4715.
Second.
Your worship, just as a reminder, you could move all three readings at the same time if you like.
Oh yeah, I forgot that. I'm reverting to the good old days.
I like doing them all three at once. No, just kidding. Did you call the question yet?
How about second and third then?
Second and third.
Okay, we'll lump those together.
Second.
Or would you just
third.
want to go back and change the motion to first, second, and third?
Your worship, you can do whatever you want. I'm going to lump them all together.
Okay, is there a consensus?
Yes.
Is there a consensus that that motion we just passed read first, second, and third?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. No dissenters. So all in favor of that motion now? Thank you. Opposed? Nobody. Thank you. Then we have the Ticket Information Utilization Amendment Bylaw, and that's the recreational.
Move for second, third reading bylaw 4717.
Thank you. Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Thank you. And now we have the zoning amendment bylaw.
Move for second, third reading bylaw 4718, building and plumbing amendment bylaw.
And then we set a date there, or is that part of it? Well, then we set a hearing date? Is that what we're going to do once we pass that? Because it said, oh, sorry, I skipped that one. We're on 24. My apologies. Energy Step Code. All right, sorry. First, second reading of Energy Step Code. All in favor? Opposed? None opposed. Now, the one that I was looking at in error, item 25. And that is first, second, and third, first, second reading and setting a public hearing date.
Move first and second reading.
Okay. A discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Now we set the hearing date.
Do
we have a hearing date on that? Is that the October 9th?
Move setting a public hearing date to October 9th.
Thank you.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Discussion. All in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Thank you very much.
Move adjournment.
Second.
Moved, second. All in favor? Opposed? Not opposed. Thank you. Look at that. We got 20 minutes to spare. Thanks, everybody, for sticking it out.